After a brutal decade defending global corporate networks from international cyber threats, I finally quit my high-pressure job to heal my mind and bought my absolute dream mountain cabin in Aspen, Colorado. It was supposed to be my secret sanctuary. But on my very first night, as I sat on the wraparound deck, breathing in the crisp pine air, my phone lit up with a call from my mother. Her voice was dripping with that familiar entitled smugness. "We sold our suburban estate today," she announced casually. "We are moving in tomorrow. Your father said it is perfectly fine." Before I could even process the absolute audacity, she delivered the final blow. "And if you do not like it, you can find somewhere else to live." My hands shook. Not from fear, but from a cold and calculating rage. I did not scream or argue. I just smiled. Looking down at the heavy stack of legal and corporate documents on my rustic oak table, I prepared a massive surprise for their arrival. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Tell me if you have ever had to stand up to a toxic family member who tried to take absolutely everything from you. My name is Clara. I am 35 years old, and I spent my entire adult life running away from the suffocating expectations of my toxic family. I built a highly successful career as an elite cybersecurity architect in Seattle, dissecting complex digital fraud, analyzing encrypted networks, and tearing down international cybercriminals. The compensation was incredible, but the stress was a slow-acting poison. My days were filled with endless code, corporate espionage, and constant emergency flights across the globe. But the real exhaustion did not come from the server rooms. It came from my family back in California. For as long as I can remember, my parents, Eleanor and Arthur, treated me like a human bank account and a permanent backup plan. In their eyes, I was merely the financial safety net for their precious golden child, my younger sister, Isabella. Isabella is 29 years old, perpetually unemployed, and full of brilliant lifestyle brand ideas that mysteriously require hundreds of thousands of dollars in seed money. That money inevitably disappears into her designer wardrobe, fake social media followers, and lavish vanity projects. Every time her influencer dreams failed, Eleanor and Arthur expected me to swoop in and cover her massive losses. They would call me in the middle of the night demanding I wire funds to save the family reputation. I finally decided that enough was enough. The intense stress of my career, combined with their constant emotional and financial extortion, pushed me to the brink of a massive burnout. So I walked away from it all. I resigned from my prestigious tech firm, collected a substantial severance package, cashed out my stock options, and decided it was time to put my own mental health first. I wanted peace. I wanted the mountains. I wanted a place where my family could not find me, could not drain my bank accounts, and could not demand a spare bedroom. That is when I found the Aspen Mountain Cabin. It was a stunning architectural masterpiece. 5 massive bedrooms, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the snow-capped peaks, a wrap-around timber deck, and a private stone staircase leading straight down to a pristine river. It cost a small fortune, but I had worked 80-hour weeks for 10 long years. I earned it because I secure financial structures for a living. I know exactly how to hide high-value assets. I did not buy the cabin under my own personal name. I created a completely anonymous limited liability company called Silver Pine Holdings. Only my trust attorney and I knew that I was the sole owner and primary shareholder of the corporation. To the outside world, I was just an ordinary tenant renting a luxury property from a faceless corporate entity. It was the absolute perfect shield against my parasitic parents. I packed up my entire life in Seattle, drove my husky across the country, and moved into my new sanctuary. The first evening was pure magic. The crisp mountain air filled my lungs, Washing away a decade of corporate anxiety, I poured myself a glass of expensive red wine, sat on the plush outdoor sofa, and listened to the rhythmic sound of the river rushing below. I felt completely free and untouchable. But that beautiful freedom lasted exactly 3 hours. My phone started ringing around 8 in the evening. The caller identification flashed with my mother's name. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but a lingering sense of daughterly obligation made me accept the call. I expected her usual complaints about her society, friends, or another subtle hint about Isabella needing emergency cash for her latest foolish venture. I was completely unprepared for the terrifying reality of her words. "Clara," she said, not bothering to ask how my cross-country move went or how I was recovering from my resignation. "Your father and I have incredible news. We just closed on the sale of our house today. The buyers gave us a fantastic cash offer, and we simply could not refuse." I frowned, taking a slow sip of my wine. That is a huge decision. "Mother, where are you going to live?" She let out a high-pitched, dismissive laugh that grated against my nerves. "Why?" "With you." "Of course." Isabella handled everything. "She found out you moved to a mountain cabin in Aspen. We are packing the moving truck tonight and we will be arriving tomorrow morning. Your father said it is perfectly fine since the cabin has 5 bedrooms. We are taking the master suite." Obviously. Since we are the parents, I sat frozen in my patio chair. My mind scrambled to make sense of what she was saying. How did they even know I was in Aspen? I had been meticulously careful about my privacy. I had not posted anything on social media. I had not updated my forwarding address with anyone but the postal service. "Mother, you cannot just move into my house," I said, trying to keep my voice steady and calm. "I moved here to be completely alone. I need space to recover from my stressful job. You and Father cannot just show up and claim my master bedroom." Her tone immediately shifted from falsely cheerful to ice cold. "Stop being so incredibly selfish. Clara, we sold our home to help your sister with a very important lifestyle brand investment. We need a place to stay. And you have plenty of room. Isabella already arranged everything. She is so smart taking care of her parents like this." The mere mention of Isabella sent a massive red flag shooting up in my mind. Isabella never did anything out of the goodness of her heart. And she certainly never handled legitimate real estate transactions. "This is my house," I repeated, my grip tightening dangerously on the delicate stem of my wine glass. "You are not moving in here." Eleanor scoffed loudly into the receiver. "Do not be ridiculous. We are arriving at 9 in the morning. And if you do not like it, you can find somewhere else to live. We are family. And family helps family. See you tomorrow." The line went dead. I slowly lowered the phone, staring out at the dark, vast mountain range. My hands began to shake. But the tremor had nothing to do with sadness or panic. It was pure, unadulterated fury. My own mother had just threatened to kick me out of my own home, but as the hot anger washed over me, my cold and calculating cybersecurity instincts kicked into high gear. I opened my laptop and pulled up the encrypted digital files for Silver Pine Holdings. I stared at the stamped legal documents proving my absolute, undeniable ownership of this multi-million-dollar property. I did not know what kind of illegal scam my sister was running, or what ridiculous lies she had told my parents to get their money. But I knew one thing for certain. They were walking straight into a legal trap, and I was going to gladly snap it shut. The morning sun crested over the rocky peaks, casting a brilliant golden light across the hardwood floors of my living room. I had barely slept. Fueled by a dangerous mix of adrenaline and espresso, my husky, Max, paced nervously by the glass doors. Sensing the shift in my energy, I stood on the deck in my silk robe, gripping a fresh mug of coffee, watching the private access road that wound down the mountainside toward my property. At exactly 9, the heavy rumble of a diesel engine shattered the mountain. Peace. A massive white moving truck barreled down the narrow driveway, entirely ignoring the posted private property signs. Right behind it was a gleaming white luxury sports utility vehicle that I instantly recognized. It was the car my parents had bought last year, using funds they claimed they needed for emergency medical expenses. The vehicle slammed into park on my crushed stone driveway. The doors swung open, and my family stepped out like they owned the entire mountain range. Eleanor emerged first, wearing an oversized fur coat and designer sunglasses, already pointing and giving sharp orders to the bewildered moving crew. Arthur followed, adjusting his expensive jacket, looking around with a smug and evaluating gaze as if he were inspecting a new real estate acquisition. And then came Isabella. My 29-year-old sister stepped out of the driver's seat, holding a tiny designer dog and wearing a smug grin that made my blood boil. She looked entirely too pleased with herself, strutting around the luxury cars like a newly minted billionaire. I set my coffee mug on the patio table, took a deep breath of the freezing air, and walked down the timber steps to meet them. Max trotted faithfully at my side, letting out a low warning growl as we approached the driveway. "Clara," my mother announced loudly, not offering a hug or even a polite greeting. "Good. You are awake. Tell the movers which room is yours. We need them to clear it out immediately so they can bring in the new master bedroom suite we just bought. I hope you have started packing your things. We are on a very tight schedule today." I stood my ground at the bottom of the stairs, crossing my arms over my chest. "I told you on the phone last night. Mother, you are not moving in here. Turn the truck around." Arthur let out a heavy sigh, pinching the bridge of his nose like I was a stubborn toddler throwing a tantrum in a luxury boutique. "Do not start this nonsense today. Clara, we have been dealing with real estate agents and bankers all week. We are exhausted. We sold the family house to fund Isabella and her new digital media venture and ested at a whirl. And we need this space. You have been unemployed for weeks now. You have plenty of free time to pack a bag and find a cheap apartment in the city." "Unemployed," I repeated, my voice deadly calm. "I resigned from a senior architect position at a global cybersecurity firm because I was burning out from constantly bailing this family out of debt. I am taking a planned sabbatical. I am not unemployed, and I am certainly not giving up my home so Isabella can fund another imaginary internet brand." Isabella scoffed, pushing her oversized sunglasses up onto her perfectly styled hair. She sauntered over to me, looking me up and down with absolute disdain. "Oh, please. You quit your job because you could not handle the pressure. Now you are just squatting in some corporate rental property, pretending you are rich. It is pathetic. Honestly, you are 35 years old, single and jobless. It is time to step aside and let the real adults handle the family business." I stared at her, marveling at her pure and unadulterated delusion. "The real adults," I said slowly. "You mean the adult who has never held a job for more than 6 months? The adult who lost $80,000 on a fake cosmetic line last year and begged mother to steal from my investment accounts to cover it?" Isabella flushed a deep, angry red. "That was a temporary cash flow issue. My new venture is going to revolutionize the wellness market. Father and mother believe in me. That is why they sold the house. They know a solid investment when they see one. And this house," I gestured to the stunning modern architecture behind me. "How exactly does moving into a luxury Aspen mountain cabin factor into your brilliant startup plan?" Eleanor stepped between us, aggressively waving her manicured hands. "That is none of your concern. Clara, Isabella brokered a brilliant deal for us. She found this property, negotiated with the holding company, and secured it for us. We are the new owners. So stop acting like a jealous and bitter spinster and go pack your bags. The movers are charging us by the hour. I looked at the moving crew. 3 burly men in matching uniforms were standing by the back of their truck, looking extremely uncomfortable as they witnessed our vicious family drama unfold on the driveway. They had not unloaded a single box yet. Sensing the explosive tension in the air, nobody is unloading anything, I announced loudly, making sure the movers heard me clearly. Because nobody is moving in. This property belongs to me. I am the legal tenant, and you are all trespassing. Arthur stepped forward. His face turning an alarming shade of purple, he pointed a thick, accusatory finger directly at my chest. Listen to me very carefully. Young lady, you do not own anything. You threw away a massive salary to come out here and play the victim. You do not get to dictate terms to us. We just paid $2 million for this exact property. We own the ground you are standing on. I blinked, genuinely stunned by the number Arthur had just confidently shouted at me. $2 million. That was exactly what their old suburban estate was worth. They had liquidated their entire life savings, their primary residence, everything they had spent 40 years building, and they had given every single penny to Isabella. You bought this house? I asked, keeping my tone deceptively flat, letting the sheer absurdity of the situation wash over me. You bought a luxury Aspen Mountain property for $2 million. The empty lot next door just sold for $4 million. Do you really think someone sold you this fully furnished architectural estate for half the price of dirt? Isabella stepped directly into my personal space, invading my boundaries, trying to use her attitude to intimidate me. She sneered a nasty, victorious smirk, twisting her features. That is the beauty of having a smart daughter. Clara. I found a highly motivated corporate seller who needed to liquidate assets immediately. I negotiated a private off-market cash deal. It is called being a brilliant businesswoman. Something you would not understand, since all you do is look at computer screens all day. Now I am telling you for the last time. Go inside. Pack your cheap clothes. Take your dog. And get off our property before I call the authorities and have you physically removed for trespassing. My heart hammered against my ribs, a steady rhythmic beat of impending warfare. I was staring at a woman who had not just lied to our parents, but had orchestrated a massive federal-level financial crime against her own flesh and blood. She had stolen their entire life savings under the guise of an impossible real estate transaction, leaving them functionally homeless, all while trying to violently evict me from a house I secretly owned. I looked at my mother, who was glaring at me with pure hatred, and my father, who looked ready to physically throw me out into the snow. They had chosen their golden child. They had handed her their entire future on a silver platter, and they were perfectly happy to throw me to the wolves to facilitate her lies. The pain of their betrayal was quickly eclipsed by the icy and calculating logic of my profession. If they wanted to play hardball over a real estate contract, I was going to give them a masterclass in corporate warfare. I held Isabella in my gaze, refusing to back down a single inch. Call them. I challenged quietly. Call the local sheriff right now. Isabella, let us see exactly who gets escorted off this property in handcuffs. Isabella let out a sharp, mocking laugh that echoed off the exterior walls of the cabin. She did not reach for her phone. Instead, she shoved past me, marching up the timber steps and straight through the open glass doors into my kitchen. Eleanor and Arthur followed her like obedient ducklings, stepping over the threshold of a house they mistakenly believed they owned. I turned and followed them inside, commanding Max to stay close to my side. The moment I stepped into my own kitchen, Isabella aggressively unzipped a sleek designer portfolio she had brought from the luxury vehicle. She pulled out a thick stack of papers bound by a heavy black clip and slammed them triumphantly onto the pristine granite countertop. "Read it and weep." "Clara," Isabella said, her voice dripping with condescension. She tapped a manicured finger against the top page. The official digital deed of transfer. $2 million paid in full. Signed, sealed, and legally binding. We are the owners of Silver Pine Holdings properties now. So stop stalling and start packing. I walked slowly toward the kitchen island. My heart maintained its steady analytical rhythm. A decade of scrutinizing fraudulent corporate documents, uncovering embezzled digital funds, and hunting down phantom shell companies had prepared me for this exact moment. I did not touch the paperwork immediately. I simply leaned over the counter and let my eyes scan the top sheet. It was supposed to be a standard Colorado warranty deed. To the untrained eye, to my desperate and gullible parents, it probably looked incredibly official. It had a fancy border, bold typography, and a digital watermark printed onto the bottom right corner. But to a former senior cybersecurity architect, it was a hilariously amateurish forgery. It looked like something a high school student would create for a fake identification card using a basic graphic design template downloaded from the internet. My eyes cataloged the glaring errors with clinical precision. First, the formatting was entirely wrong for Pitkin County real estate recordings. The margins did not meet the mandatory recording requirements, and the assessor parcel number was missing 2 entire digits. Second, the font used for the official county clerk header was a standard system font instead of the proprietary typeface utilized by the actual municipal office. It was a sloppy oversight that screamed amateur hour, but the most damning evidence was the signature block. The document claimed the property was transferred by the authorized managing member of Silver Pine Holdings. Below that title was a wildly looping, illegible signature belonging to a fictional man named Marcus Sterling. I almost laughed out loud. Silver Pine Holdings had exactly one authorized managing member, and that was me. There was no Marcus Sterling anywhere in my corporate paperwork. Isabella had literally invented a phantom executive to sign over a house that I owned. I leaned closer, examining the digital watermark. It was not a cryptographic seal. It was just a flat, glossy image you could copy and paste from any local government website. There was no raised notary stamp, no legitimate commission number, and the notary signature was dated on a Sunday, a day when county recording offices are strictly closed. "Is there a problem with your reading comprehension?" Eleanor snapped, crossing her arms as she stood next to her precious daughter. "The document is perfectly clear. Isabella negotiated directly with the holding company executives. She saved us hundreds of thousands of dollars in broker fees by handling the transaction privately." I shifted my gaze from the fake deed to my mother. "You gave her the money directly?" I asked, keeping my tone perfectly level despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "You transferred your entire life savings to Isabella so she could handle this private transaction." Arthur puffed out his chest, stepping forward to defend the golden child. "Of course we did. Isabella set up a secure digital escrow account to facilitate the wire transfer. The money went straight to Silver Pine Holdings. We received the confirmation receipt yesterday morning before we packed the truck. My daughter is a financial genius. You should be taking notes instead of standing there looking foolish. A secure digital escrow account." The puzzle pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. I looked back down at the portfolio. Peeking out from beneath the fake deed was a printed wire transfer confirmation. I reached out and slid it from under the heavy clip before Isabella could stop me. "Hey, put that down," Isabella barked, lunging forward to snatch it back. But I had already seen enough. The routing number on the wire transfer receipt did not belong to a licensed Colorado escrow company. It did not even belong to a domestic bank. The 9-digit sequence was a routing code for a notorious offshore banking institution based in the Bahamas. It was a bank heavily favored by online influencer syndicates and unregulated cryptocurrency exchanges. Isabella had not paid a single dime to Silver Pine Holdings. I knew that for an absolute fact, because my corporate bank accounts had a balance of 0 incoming transfers. She had convinced our parents to liquidate their entire suburban home, convinced them to wire $2 million into a fake offshore escrow account she controlled, and then printed out a fake deed from the internet to prove she bought them an Aspen mountain cabin. She had stolen their entire future to fund her fake lifestyle and offshore vices, leaving them completely destitute and functionally homeless. And she had chosen my specific rental house to use as her fake purchase because she thought I was just a broke and powerless tenant who could be easily bullied into leaving. She had no idea that she had just attempted real estate fraud on the actual owner of the holding company. I slowly set the wire transfer receipt back on the granite counter. I looked at Isabella. Her smug confidence was still plastered across her face, but I could see the tiny beads of sweat forming along her hairline. She knew she was playing a dangerous game, but she was arrogant enough to believe she had already won. She genuinely thought I was going to pack my bags and run away crying, leaving her to deal with the fallout whenever the real owner supposedly showed up. She assumed my silence was defeat. "Well," Arthur demanded, slamming his hand flat against the countertop, "are you done playing lawyer? You have seen the proof? The house is ours. Now go upstairs, pack your bags, and get out of my house." I did not raise my voice. I did not show an ounce of fear. I simply picked up my coffee mug, took a calm sip, and looked my father dead in the eye. "I am not going anywhere. Arthur, that piece of paper is completely worthless." Eleanor let out a dramatic gasp, clutching her chest as if I had physically struck her. "You, ungrateful and wretched girl. We are your parents. We own this property now. How dare you defy us?" Isabella darkened with genuine malice. She stepped closer, her fists clenched at her sides. "I warned you outside. Clara, you are trespassing. You do not own this place, and you do not have any right to stay here. We are the legal owners. If you do not walk out that front door right now, we are going to have you forcibly removed." I stood my ground. My eyes locked on hers. The air in the kitchen grew thick with tension. This was the moment of no return. I was staring at my family, a group of people who had completely discarded me in favor of a daughter who was currently robbing them blind. They had willingly handed over everything they owned to a criminal, and they were actively participating in my attempted eviction. They wanted a war. They were about to get one. Arthur reached into the pocket of his pristine jacket and pulled out his smartphone. His fingers jabbed at the screen with aggressive, self-righteous force as he dialed the local emergency number. He turned his back to me, slightly puffing out his chest as he prepared to deliver the performance of a lifetime to the local emergency dispatcher. "Yes. Hello? I need officers at my property immediately." Arthur barked into the receiver, his voice trembling with manufactured distress. "We just purchased a home in Aspen, and there is a hostile squatter refusing to leave. She is becoming highly aggressive, and we feel threatened. Yes. We have all the legal paperwork proving our ownership. Please hurry." He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket, turning to face me with a look of absolute triumph. "You brought this on yourself. Clara, you could have walked away with a shred of dignity, but now you are going to be dragged out of here in handcuffs." Eleanor stepped up beside him, adjusting her oversized fur coat. She looked at me not as a mother looks at a daughter, But as a wealthy socialite looks at a nuisance on the sidewalk, it really is a shame you turned out this way. She sighed, her tone dripping with fake pity. Isabella warned us. You might have a mental break after losing your corporate job. A single unemployed woman in her 30s. It is just sad. We tried to give you grace. But you leave us no choice. Isabella leaned against the granite kitchen island, crossing her arms and flashing a picture-perfect smile. You should go pack a bag before the authorities get here. Sister, it will save you the embarrassment of being paraded out in your pajamas. I did not move a single muscle. I stood beside my husky, Max, resting my hand gently on his head to keep him calm. The contrast between my family and their manic theatrical energy and my icy analytical silence seemed to unnerve Isabella just a fraction. But she quickly masked it with another arrogant smirk. Agonizing minutes passed before the sound of heavy tires crunching on the gravel driveway signaled the arrival of law enforcement. 2 local sheriff deputies stepped up to the open glass doors. The older deputy, a man with a stern expression, took the lead while his younger partner stood back. Assessing the tension in the room, "Officer, thank goodness you are here," Arthur exclaimed, rushing forward with both hands raised in a gesture of helplessness. I am Arthur, the legal owner of this estate. My wife and I just drove up here after closing a massive cash deal on this property. And this woman is refusing to vacate. The older deputy held up a hand to pause my father in his frantic speech. Let us take this one step at a time. Sir, who exactly is this woman? Eleanor let out a dramatic, trembling sigh, pressing a hand to her chest. She is our daughter. Officer, it breaks my heart to say this, but she is deeply unwell. She recently failed out of her high-paying career in Seattle and has been squatting here pretending she lives this luxurious lifestyle. She is incredibly jealous of her younger sister who actually brokered the purchase of this home for us. Isabella seized her cue perfectly. She stepped forward, radiating the calm and trustworthy energy of a successful young professional. She handed the designer portfolio directly to the older deputy. Here is the deed. Officer, $2 million paid in full and signed over by the managing member of the holding company. We have the wire transfer receipts right behind it. We gave her plenty of notice to pack her things. But she is completely delusional. The deputy opened the portfolio and scanned the fake Colorado warranty deed. He was a patrol officer, not a forensic accountant or a cyber investigator. To him, standing in a kitchen on a chilly morning, the digital watermark, the bold typography, and the official-looking signatures appeared legitimate enough to support my family and their story. The deputy turned his stern gaze toward me. Madam, is this true? Are you refusing to leave a property that has been legally sold? I met the deputy and his eyes with complete composure. That document is a fraudulent forgery. Officer, I am the sole legal occupant of this house, and I have never authorized any sale to these people. My sister is running a financial scam on my parents, and that piece of paper was likely printed off the internet yesterday. Arthur exploded, stepping aggressively toward me before the younger deputy intervened. Listen to Hair Lies. She is a bitter and failed spinster trying to steal our retirement home. Throw her out. The older deputy sighed heavily, closing the portfolio and handing it back to Isabella. He looked incredibly tired, clearly recognizing the messy and toxic reality of a family civil dispute. Look, folks, I am not a judge and I am not a real estate lawyer. I cannot verify corporate holding company structures or wire transfers right here on the kitchen counter. As far as the department is concerned, this is a civil matter that needs to be sorted out in a courtroom. Eleanor gasped in outrage. A civil matter? We paid $2 million. We have the deed. Madam, please, the deputy warned, raising his voice slightly to regain control of the room. Tensions are extremely high right now, and my primary job is to ensure nobody gets hurt. The deputy turned back to me, his expression softening just a fraction, though his professional boundary remained firm, given the fact that they hold physical paperwork claiming ownership, and you are currently outnumbered in a highly volatile domestic situation. I am going to ask you to vacate the premises for the night. We need to de-escalate this immediately before someone does something they regret. You can take this to civil court on Monday morning and let a judge look at the paperwork, but for tonight, to keep the peace, you need to leave. A heavy and victorious silence fell over the kitchen. Eleanor clapped her hands together in sheer delight, a vicious and triumphant smile spreading across her face. Arthur puffed his chest out, looking at me like an insect he had just successfully crushed. Isabella simply stood by the island, practically vibrating with smug satisfaction. They had won. They had successfully weaponized the local authorities to kick me out of my own home. And they believed their $2 million heist was perfectly secure. I looked at the deputies, then at my gloating family. My brilliant analytical mind raced through the variables. If I fought the police right now, if I stubbornly refused a direct de-escalation order, I would be arrested for disturbing the peace. A highly publicized arrest record would jeopardize my professional security clearances and severely complicate the federal trap I was currently building. I needed my freedom. I needed my encrypted hard drives. And more importantly, I needed to leave them alone in this house so they could confidently dig their own graves. I gave the deputy a slow and compliant nod. "Fine," I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion. "I will pack an overnight bag and leave to keep the peace." Isabella chuckled, a low and nasty sound that scraped against the pristine granite counters. "Make sure you take the mutt with you," she sneered. "We are replacing these floors anyway. But I do not want dog hair on my new furniture." I did not grant her the satisfaction of a response. I simply turned on my heel and walked up the floating glass staircase to the master suite. My family erupted into quiet, celebratory whispers downstairs, completely blind to the fact that their petty surface-level victory was exactly what I needed. By forcing me out the front door, they had just locked themselves inside a heavily surveilled and heavily documented federal crime scene. Once inside the master suite, the heavy oak door clicked shut behind me, sealing off the muffled sounds of my family gloating downstairs. I stood in the center of the spacious room, taking a deep breath. There were no tears. There was no panic. My heart rate had already returned to a steady and calm rhythm. In the cybersecurity world, panic is the enemy of strategy. I walked over to my walk-in closet and pulled down my sleek black suitcase. I did not waste time packing an entire wardrobe. My priority was not clothing. It was ammunition. I knelt beside the hidden floor safe tucked beneath the custom shelving. After punching in the biometric code, I pulled out 2 military-grade encrypted hard drives. These small metal rectangles held the absolute totality of Silver Pine holdings. They contained every bank statement, every verified tax record, the original certified property deed, and the complete financial history of my corporate career. More importantly, they held the master access keys to the smart home security system I had installed a month ago. When you buy a multi-million-dollar property as a single woman, you do not skimp on security. I had personally hardwired covert high-definition cameras into the architectural features of the house. There were flush-mounted lenses in the kitchen pendant lights, micro cameras seamlessly integrated into the living room timber beams, and audio receivers hidden in the patio decking. It was a closed-loop system that recorded directly to a secure cloud server, which I exclusively controlled. I slipped the hard drives into the padded compartment of my suitcase. Then, I packed a few tailored suits, a cashmere sweater, and my high-end cosmetics. If I was going to orchestrate a federal takedown, I was going to do it looking absolutely flawless. Max whined softly, nudging my hand with his wet nose. I smiled, dropping to one knee to scratch behind his ears. "We are going on a little vacation, buddy," I whispered. "Just for a little while." I grabbed my laptop bag, zipped up the suitcase, and snapped a matching leather leash onto his collar. I took one last look around the master suite. The bed was perfectly made. The mountain breeze was fluttering through the sheer curtains, and the room looked serene. By tonight, Eleanor and Arthur would undoubtedly claim the space, spreading their cheap luggage across my custom duvet. Let them. They were simply stepping onto a perfectly baited trap. I descended the glass staircase with measured and confident steps. The scene in the living room was predictably pathetic. Arthur was already pouring himself a glass of my expensive bourbon from the wet bar, while Eleanor was measuring the windows with her hands, loudly complaining about my choice of drapery. Isabella was slouched on my Italian leather sofa, her muddy designer snow boots resting casually on the pristine upholstery. The two sheriff deputies stood near the front door, looking relieved that I was complying without a physical altercation. "Leaving so soon?" Isabella mocked, not bothering to lift her head from the couch cushions. "Make sure you leave the garage clicker on the counter. And do not steal any of the silverware on your way out." I stopped at the bottom of the stairs, adjusting my grip on my suitcase. I did not glare. I did not raise my voice. I simply offered her a smile so devoid of warmth it could have frozen the river outside. "Keep the clicker, Isabella," I said smoothly. "I am sure you will find it very useful for the next few days." I turned to my parents, who were watching me with a mixture of disdain and triumph. "Enjoy the house. Mother, Father, I highly recommend watching the sunset from the patio. It really is $1 million view." Without waiting for their response, I walked past the deputies, offering them a polite nod of gratitude for their time. I stepped out into the bright aspen sunlight, loaded my suitcase into the trunk of my car, and opened the back door for Max. He jumped in happily, unaware of the treacherous family warfare unfolding around us. I slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and drove away from my own property without looking in the rear-view mirror. The drive down the mountain pass was spectacular. With the heater on and the crisp air rushing against the glass, I felt an exhilarating surge of power. They thought they had backed me into a corner. They thought stripping me of my home would break my spirit. They completely and fundamentally misunderstood who they were dealing with. You cannot outsmart a woman whose entire career was built on dismantling complex digital syndicates. 10 minutes later, I pulled into the valet circle of a 5-star luxury ski resort. I handed my keys to the attendant, tipped him generously, and walked into the grand lobby. My severance package alone was enough to buy out the entire hotel for a year, so I did not hesitate at the reception desk. I booked their premier Mountain View penthouse suite for an indefinite stay, requesting a corner room with the best possible fiber optic connection. The penthouse was breathtaking. It featured sweeping panoramic views of the Rocky Peaks, a private wrap-around balcony, and a massive mahogany dining table that would serve perfectly as my command center. A bellhop delivered my luggage, and room service promptly arrived with a bottle of sparkling water and a silver bowl of fresh fruit once the heavy wooden door clicked shut, leaving me completely alone in the silent luxury of the suite. I went to work. I unpacked my laptops, lined them up precisely on the mahogany table, and plugged in my encrypted hard drives. My fingers flew across the keyboard with practiced lethal speed. I bypassed the dual authentication protocols and brought the remote surveillance network online. The screens flared to life. 4 different high-definition angles of my mountain cabin populated my monitors, The audio fed through my noise-canceling headphones with crystal clarity. On screen 1, I watched Arthur carrying boxes into my kitchen. On screen 2, Eleanor was physically ripping my expensive sheer curtains off the master bedroom windows. And on screen 3, the most important feed of all, Isabella was standing alone on the patio, pulling her smartphone from her pocket with a frantic and nervous energy. I leaned back in my plush leather desk chair, steepling my fingers together as I watched the monitors. My family was celebrating a hollow victory inside a glass cage, completely oblivious to the fact that I was watching their every move, recording every word, and tracking every lie. The eviction was not a defeat. It was a calculated and strategic retreat. Now the real game was about to begin. The glow from my 4 monitors illuminated the darkened hotel suite. I adjusted my noise-canceling headphones, isolating the audio feed from the living room of my Aspen property. The high-definition cameras I had seamlessly integrated into the timber beams provided a crystal-clear view of the chaos unfolding inside my home. The moving crew had finally begun hauling heavy cardboard boxes and cheap, oversized furniture through my custom mahogany front doors. I watched with clinical detachment as a massive, gaudy floral sofa was shoved into the center of my minimalist living room, completely clashing with the sleek aesthetic I had carefully curated. My fingers flew across my laptop keyboard, initiating a screen recording protocol. In the cybersecurity world, digital evidence is the only currency that matters. I was not just watching my family invade my space. I was archiving a meticulously time-stamped digital record of trespassing, unauthorized entry, and impending property damage. Every movement they made was being logged directly to a secure encrypted cloud server that they could never access. The audio feed crackled to life, picking up the sharp and grating sound of my mother and her voice. Eleanor strutted through the open-concept kitchen, running a critical finger along the edge of my imported granite countertops. She wrinkled her nose, looking around the pristine space with profound disappointment. "It is just so sterile," Eleanor complained loudly, her voice echoing through the vaulted ceiling. "Honestly, you would think a woman making her kind of money would have better taste. It looks like a dentist office. There is absolutely no warmth." Arthur trailed behind her, carrying a cardboard box labeled with his golf trophies. He dumped the box unceremoniously onto my custom glass dining table, wincing as the heavy cardboard scratched the delicate surface. "What do you expect from Clara?" Arthur grumbled. "She has always been cold. No husband. No children. Just computer screens and numbers. Thank goodness Isabella stepped in and secured this property for us. We can finally strip all this modern nonsense out and make it feel like a real family home. A home with actual heart and soul." I sat in my plush hotel chair, sipping my sparkling water. Their insults, which would have gutted me a decade ago, now simply amused me. They were standing in a $2 million architectural masterpiece, completely blind to its value, tearing down my character to justify their blatant theft. They needed me to be the villain so they could play the victorious heroes of their own twisted narrative. But the real entertainment began when Isabella strolled into the frame. She had abandoned her frantic pacing on the patio and joined our parents in the main living area. She pointed toward the magnificent structural partition that separated the living room from the formal dining area. It was an intricately designed, custom imported stone fireplace, specifically engineered to support the massive weight of the second-story master suite and the roofline. "This has got to go," Isabella announced, slapping her hand against the beautiful stonework. "It completely ruins the flow of the room. We need a massive open-concept floor plan for my influencer events. If we are going to host sponsors and throw huge launch parties, we cannot have this ugly barrier blocking the mountain view from the kitchen." Arthur nodded enthusiastically, completely captivated by his daughter, and her brilliant vision. You are absolutely right. Isabella, we should knock it down right now. Why wait for expensive contractors? I have my heavy tools in the back of the vehicle. Let us open this space up before the sun goes down. It will be our first real renovation as the new owners. I leaned forward, my eyes widening slightly as I stared at the monitor. My hands hovered over the keyboard. They were not seriously going to do this. That stone fireplace was not a cosmetic partition. It was a primary load-bearing structure. Removing it, without structural steel beams and a licensed contractor, would severely compromise the integrity of the entire second floor. It was a catastrophic architectural violation. Not to mention wildly illegal without municipal building permits. Within 10 minutes, Arthur and Isabella marched back into the living room. Wielding heavy steel sledgehammers they had retrieved from their luxury vehicle, Eleanor stood safely off to the side, clapping her hands in delighted anticipation. This is going to be so refreshing. She cheered, completely ignorant of the disaster about to unfold. Isabella swung the first blow. The heavy steel head of the sledgehammer smashed into the custom stonework. The sickening crack of splintering rock echoed through my headphones. A massive hole appeared in the beautiful masonry, exposing the reinforced drywall and structural framing beneath. Arthur laughed, stepping up to take the next swing. He swung with all his might, tearing a jagged and ugly chunk out of the wall. Plaster and stone dust billowed into the air, settling like a thick white fog over my imported countertops, my glass dining table, and their gaudy floral sofa. I did not panic. I simply hit the capture button on my keyboard, saving a high-resolution screenshot of my father and sister actively destroying my property. Every swing of their sledgehammers was adding tens of thousands of dollars in malicious property damage to the mounting federal case against them. They believed they were remodeling their new mountain house. In reality, they were creating undeniable high-definition video evidence of severe structural vandalism on a property they did not legally own. I watched as the ceiling above them gave a subtle and ominous groan, a distinct structural protest against the removal of its primary support. The sheer arrogance of their ignorance was staggering. They were systematically dismantling a house they had stolen, oblivious to the fact that they were physically and legally bringing the roof down on their own heads. I adjusted my headphones, leaned back in my chair, and let the cameras keep rolling while my family continued their destructive renovation downstairs. I muted the audio feed of their sledgehammers. It was time to shift my focus from physical vandalism to financial devastation. The structural damage to my cabin was severe, but it was nothing compared to the financial crime Isabella had just committed. I minimized the camera windows on my secondary monitors and pulled my primary laptop forward. I launched my proprietary cyber tracking software, a highly restricted program I had retained access to as part of my elite professional network. This software was designed to untangle the most sophisticated digital fraud schemes on the planet. Isabella and her amateur hour scam was not going to stand a chance. I closed my eyes for a fraction of a second, recalling the exact 9-digit routing number and the corresponding account details I had memorized from the wire transfer receipt in my kitchen. A good security architect never forgets a string of numbers. I typed the digits into the global tracking database and hit enter. The screen turned black for a moment as the system queried international financial registries searching for the digital footprints of $2 million. The results populated my screen in a cascade of green text. I leaned closer, my eyes darting across the digital ledger. Arthur and Eleanor had authorized the wire transfer from their primary joint savings account at a local credit union. The funds were flagged as a real estate escrow deposit, but the destination was not a licensed Colorado title company. The money had landed in a holding account registered to an entity called Summit Elite Ventures. Summit Elite Ventures. The name alone practically screamed shell company. I ran a cross-reference on the corporate registry database. As I suspected, Summit Elite was incorporated exactly 3 weeks ago in Delaware, a state notorious for allowing anonymous corporate ownership. There was no physical address listed, only a registered agent operating out of a strip mall post office box. Isabella had set up a dummy corporation specifically to intercept our parents and their life savings. She had probably told them Summit Elite was the parent company of Silver Pine Holdings, and they were too financially illiterate to verify her claim. But the money did not stay in Delaware. My fingers flew across the keyboard executing a deeper trace protocol. Fraudsters never leave stolen cash in a domestic account for long. The United States banking system is too heavily monitored. Isabella knew she had to move the funds outside federal jurisdiction quickly. I followed the digital breadcrumbs. Less than 2 hours after my parents initiated the wire transfer, the $2 million was split into 4 separate transactions. This was a classic money laundering technique known as layering entrelações. Designed to confuse investigators and obscure the final destination of the funds, I tracked the first chunk of money as it bounced from Delaware to a holding account in Dubai. The second chunk routed through a cryptocurrency exchange based in Eastern Europe. The third and fourth chunks were funneled through a series of anonymous online dummy merchant accounts. Isabella was trying to wash the money, but she was leaving a painfully obvious digital trail. She was arrogant, but she was not a professional money launderer. She was a lifestyle addict with a god complex who watched too many crime movies. I initiated a consolidation algorithm, commanding my software to track all 4 diverging paths simultaneously and find their eventual convergence point. I watched the progress bar on my screen slowly fill. My heart hammered a steady rhythm against my ribs. I needed to see exactly where she was hiding the cash. The software chimed a sharp metallic sound cutting through the silence of my hotel suite. The results materialized on the screen. All 4 transaction paths eventually converged and dumped their washed funds into a single, highly secure offshore account in the Bahamas. I stared at the offshore banking institution and its digital profile. The Bahamas account was heavily fortified behind international banking secrecy laws. I could see the final destination of the stolen money. But the account ownership was completely shielded. The bank used alphanumeric proxy tags instead of human names. Without a court order or direct login credentials, I could not legally prove that Isabella was the owner of that specific Bahamas account, and without that definitive link, my case for federal wire fraud was incomplete. I drummed my fingers against the mahogany table. I had the fake deed. I had the initial wire transfer showing the theft. I had the digital map proving the money laundering. But the final piece of the puzzle, the undisputed proof that Isabella was the ultimate beneficiary of the offshore account, was locked behind a wall of Caribbean encryption. I needed the login credentials. I needed the device she used to authorize the offshore transfers. Or failing that, I needed her personal financial history, her social security verification, and the secondary authentication codes tied to her private phone. I could not hack her phone remotely without risking detection. Isabella might be a reckless idiot, but she was a paranoid idiot. She would have notifications set up for unauthorized access attempts. I needed someone on the inside. I needed someone who had physical access to her devices, who knew her passwords, and who had the legal right to scrutinize her marital assets. A slow and dangerous smile spread across my face. There was exactly one person on the planet who fit that description: Julian. Isabella had been married to Julian for 3 years. He was a brilliant and sharp-witted man who worked as a forensic accountant in downtown Denver. My family had always treated Julian with a sickening blend of fake politeness and subtle condescending microaggressions. Eleanor constantly made passive-aggressive comments about Julian not making enough money to support Isabella and her extreme luxury tastes. Arthur would constantly undermine his intelligence, asking him financial questions, only to loudly disagree with his expert answers because of a blog post he had read. And through all of it, Isabella had never defended him. She just sat there scrolling on her phone, completely indifferent to the toxic environment her family created for her husband. Julian was a powerhouse, and my family treated him like an inconvenient accessory to their golden child. I knew he was exhausted by Isabella and her constant financial failures and her massive, fragile ego. I knew he was tired of covering her tracks and maintaining the illusion of a perfect marriage for the sake of my parents. Isabella thought she had orchestrated the perfect crime because she believed nobody in the family was smart enough to catch her. She completely forgot that she was legally bound to a forensic accountant, and she had just actively angered a cybersecurity architect. I minimized my tracking software and pulled up my private contacts. I had not spoken to Julian in months, keeping my distance to avoid the toxic blast radius of my family. But right now, we shared a common enemy. If Isabella was willing to steal $2 million from her own parents and launder it offshore, she was definitely hiding money from her husband. Julian would want to know. And more importantly, Julian would want revenge. I picked up my phone and drafted a highly secure encrypted message to his private professional email address. I did not include any incriminating details. I simply asked him to meet me for coffee at a discreet location, stressing that it involved Isabella, a massive financial liability, and his own legal protection. I hit send. The trap was expanding, and I had just recruited my inside man. I did not have to wait long. Less than 15 minutes later, my cell phone vibrated on the mahogany desk. The caller identification displayed a blocked number, a standard precaution for high-tier forensic accountants who did not want their activities tracked by casual acquaintances. I accepted the call, bringing the phone to my ear without saying a word. In my profession, whoever speaks first loses the leverage. Clara. A sharp and composed voice came through the speaker. It was Julian. I am currently in the middle of auditing a highly sensitive corporate merger. You sent a message to my encrypted firm email mentioning Isabella and financial liability and my personal legal protection. You have exactly 60 seconds to explain why I should not block your number and walk back into my boardroom. I smiled at the sheer efficiency of his tone. Julian was a powerhouse. Over the past 3 years, I had watched my mother, Eleanor, inflict a relentless campaign of subtle, smiling microaggressions against him. At Thanksgiving dinners, Eleanor would make pointed and condescending remarks about Julian choosing a boring numbers job instead of becoming a startup founder, or casually suggest that Julian was perhaps holding Isabella back from her true potential. Arthur would constantly undermine his financial expertise, and through all of it, Isabella had never defended him. Julian had endured it with icy and impeccable grace. Treating my parents like mildly annoying clients, he was forced to placate, but I knew he despised them. More importantly, I knew he was entirely too smart to stay attached to a sinking ship like my sister for much longer. I am not calling for family small talk, Julian, I said, keeping my voice perfectly level. I am calling architect to accountant. Your wife just orchestrated a massive financial scam against my parents. She convinced them to liquidate their primary residence, took their $2 million, and routed it through a Delaware shell company straight into an anonymous offshore account in the Bahamas. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. I could practically hear the gears turning in Julian and his brilliant analytical mind as he processed the gravity of my words. That is a very serious accusation, Clara, he replied, his voice dropping an octave, completely stripping away the polite family facade. If you are angry about whatever petty drama your parents are currently involved in, leave me out of it. I do not have time for Isabella and her usual financial incompetence. This is not her usual incompetence, I countered smoothly. This is federal wire fraud. She printed a fake Colorado warranty deed from the internet and told them she bought my Aspen Mountain cabin. They are currently standing in my living room with sledgehammers, destroying my load-bearing walls because they think they own the property. But the money is gone. Julian, and here is why you need to care. Isabella is unemployed. You are the primary breadwinner. You file your taxes jointly. When the federal agents trace that Bahamas account, the government is going to look directly at your firm's salary and your personal assets to recover the stolen funds. She is using your marital financial umbrella to shield her money laundering. A sharp intake of breath echoed through the receiver. As a forensic accountant, Julian knew exactly how devastating the legal doctrine of joint and several liability could be. If the federal government decided he was a complicit spouse, they could freeze his bank accounts, seize his investment portfolios, and completely destroy the prestigious career he had sacrificed everything to build prestigious. Isabella was not just ruining her parents. She was dragging her highly successful husband straight into a federal indictment. Do you have proof? Julian demanded. His voice was no longer dismissive. It was lethal. I have the digital trace of the wire transfers. I confirmed. I have the shell company and corporation documents. I have high-definition video of the property damage. What I do not have is the final link. I need the login credentials or the secondary device authentication that ties Isabella to that specific offshore account. I know you have access to her home office. I know you know how to bypass her superficial security measures. I need an inside man, Julian. And you need to legally distance yourself from a federal criminal before the ink on the warrants dries. I could hear the faint, muffled sound of Denver traffic in the background. Julian had clearly stepped out of his corporate building to take this call on the street, ensuring he was not recorded by his firm and their internal servers. I have suspected for months that she was hiding something, he said, the realization hardening his tone into pure steel. She has been erratic, taking secret phone calls at all hours and lying about where she goes during the day. I thought she was just funneling my money into another one of her idiotic social media campaigns. If she is running a shell company scam using our home network, she has compromised my entire life. Then let us destroy her together. I offered, you get the evidence you need to file an ironclad fault-based divorce and protect your assets. I get the evidence I need to put her in a federal penitentiary and reclaim my property. We both win. Where are you? Julian asked, making the decision instantly. I am staying at a resort down the mountain. I replied, but we cannot meet here. My parents might figure out where I am. And we need absolute privacy. There is an exclusive ski lodge club in the village. Julian instructed, his voice reverting to full command mode. It is called the Summit Lounge. I rent a private conference room there for off-site client meetings. It has zero surveillance and requires a key card for entry. I will message you the address and the temporary access code. Be there in exactly 2 hours. Bring the hard drives. If this is real, Clara, I am going to gut her financially before the federal agents even put the handcuffs on her. I will be there. I promised. The call disconnected. I placed my phone face down on the mahogany table and let out a long, satisfying breath. The dominoes were perfectly aligned. My family thought they had successfully evicted a weak and unemployed spinster. Instead, they had just forced a senior cybersecurity architect and a ruthless forensic accountant into a lethal alliance. I packed my laptops back into my leather bag, gave Max a reassuring pat on the head, and headed for the door. It was time to go to work. The drive to the village took 30 minutes, giving me just enough time to mentally rehearse the presentation of my evidence. I navigated my car through the heavy snow and pulled into an underground parking garage 2 blocks away from the Summit Lounge. I left Max resting comfortably in the climate-controlled vehicle with the security mode activated, grabbed my heavy leather bag, and walked out into the freezing mountain air. The lodge was incredibly discreet. Nestled between a high-end ski boutique and a private dining club, there was no massive illuminated sign. Just a frosted glass door with a minimalist logo. I stepped inside, bypassing the main counter where staff were pouring expensive drinks for wealthy tourists, and headed straight for the private corridor in the back. I punched the temporary access code Julian had provided into the digital keypad. The heavy door clicked open, sealing out the ambient noise of the lounge the second it closed behind me. The private conference room was a windowless and soundproofed bunker designed for million-dollar corporate negotiations. Julian was already sitting at the far end of the sleek wooden table. He wore a perfectly tailored navy suit, his expression sharp and focused. He looked like a man who could dismantle a fortune company before his morning coffee. There was no trace of the quiet and polite son-in-law who endured my mother and her passive-aggressive remarks at holiday dinners. This was Julian, the apex predator. He did not offer a hug or a pleasant greeting. He merely pointed a perfectly manicured finger at the empty chair across from him. "Sit down and show me everything," Julian commanded, his dark eyes entirely devoid of warmth. I did not waste time with pleasantries. I unzipped my leather bag and pulled out my primary laptop, plugging in the encrypted hard drive. While the system booted up, I slid a physical manila folder across the smooth surface of the table. "Open it," I said. "That is a copy of the fake Colorado warranty deed your wife used to steal my parents and their life savings." Julian opened the folder. His eyes darted across the document, absorbing the fraudulent details with frightening speed. I watched his eyebrows twitch as he noticed the amateur formatting errors, the missing parcel digits, and the ridiculous digital watermark. She actually used a standard system font for a municipal county header, Julian murmured, his voice laced with absolute disgust. "She is not just a criminal, Clara. She is an incredibly stupid criminal." I turned my laptop screen toward him. "It gets much worse. I promised. I am the sole owner and managing member of Silver Pine Holdings. Isabella photoshopped a fake executive named Marcus Sterling to sign over a house that I own. But the real crime is the money trail." I pulled up the digital ledger. I watched her convince Eleanor and Arthur to wire $2 million directly into a Delaware shell company called Summit Elite Ventures. I explained, pointing to the highlighted transactions. From there, I tracked the funds as she layered them through Dubai and an Eastern European cryptocurrency exchange. The money finally landed in an anonymous offshore holding account in the Bahamas. I waited for the shock. I expected him to gasp, to deny it, or perhaps to shed a tear for the catastrophic implosion of his marriage. Instead, Julian leaned back in his leather chair, stared at the ceiling, and let out a sharp and chilling laugh. It was a cold and humorless sound that contained 0% heartbreak and 100% vindication. He laughed until he had to wipe a stray tear of pure amusement from the corner of his eye. "I thought she was just an incompetent narcissist," Julian said, shaking his head as he looked back down at the fake deed. "But she actually crossed the line into federal wire fraud. She just handed me the silver bullet I have been looking for." He reached down, lifted his designer briefcase onto the table, and snapped the brass locks open. "It is my turn to share. Clara, you think you are the only one who has been doing forensic accounting this week." Julian pulled out a thick stack of bank statements highlighted in red and yellow ink. 2 weeks ago, I noticed a massive discrepancy in our primary joint checking account, he explained, sliding the papers toward me. Isabella claimed she was moving funds around to invest in a highly exclusive wellness brand incubator. But I am a forensic accountant. I do not take my wife and her word for anything regarding my money. I quietly ran a deep audit on every single account we share. Over the past 8 months, Isabella has systematically drained $500,000 of my personal earnings. She funneled it all into fake marketing agencies, high-stakes, offshore luxury purchases, and underground syndicates to inflate her brand. I stared at the statements tracing the massive frequent withdrawals. She lost everything. I realized the pieces of her frantic behavior suddenly making perfect sense. She lost your money and she was completely desperate. Julian nodded, his jaw clenching with barely contained fury. The shadow lenders were clearly circling. She needed a massive influx of cash to cover her debts and replace the money she stole from me before I noticed it was gone. That is why she targeted your parents. They were the perfect gullible marks. She knew they would liquidate their house in a heartbeat if she promised them a shiny new mountain estate. She never intended to buy a house. She just needed to steal their $2 million to save her own skin. She is going to take them down with her, I said, feeling a surge of disgust for my parents and their blindness, but an even stronger hatred for my sister and her ruthless greed. Julian reached into his briefcase one final time. He pulled out a pristine and legally binding document, bound in a blue cover. He slapped it down on top of the bank statements. "Let her take them down," Julian said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. Eleanor and Arthur enabled this monster her entire life. They created a woman who thinks she can steal from her husband and scam her parents without facing a single consequence. But she is not taking me down with her. I looked at the blue document. It was a fully drafted petition for dissolution of marriage. The paperwork was immaculate, completely filled out and ready to be filed with the local superior court. I drafted these divorce papers 3 days ago, Julian revealed, tapping the front page. I was just waiting for the right moment to serve her so I could financially ruin her in civil court. But your evidence changes everything. We are not just going to divorce her, Clara. We are going to lock her in a federal prison cell. I met his Geza, seeing the exact same cold and calculating fire that burned in my own chest. We did not need to cry over the family we had lost. We just needed to execute the trap perfectly. I need her secondary authentication codes, I told him, pointing to my laptop screen. I can see the Bahamas account where she parked my parents and their money, but I cannot legally tie her name to it without her direct digital fingerprint. Can you get me her backup device? Julian offered a dark and brilliant smile. Isabella is an idiot. She leaves her backup smartwatch and synchronized phone unsecured in her home office safe because she assumes I do not know the combination. I will have the device in your hands by tomorrow morning. We are going to bleed her dry. I closed my laptop, the screen going dark. The alliance was officially forged. My parents had treated Julian like a second-class citizen, and they had treated me like an expendable bank account. Now the two people they severely underestimated were holding all the cards. I will prepare the federal dossier, I said, packing my equipment back into the leather bag. Once we have the digital fingerprint linking her to the offshore account, we go straight to the authorities. Julian stood up, smoothing the front of his navy suit. Let her enjoy her fake mountain cabin for a few more days, he said smoothly. I want her to feel completely untouchable right before we tear her entire life apart. Julian turned and exited the soundproof conference room, his navy suit disappearing into the bustling lounge. I remained in the bunker for another hour, meticulously organizing the initial files on my encrypted hard drive before making my way back to the luxury resort. The rest of the evening was spent in total isolation, preparing my tracking software for the massive data influx I knew was coming. I ordered room service, fed Max his dinner, and watched the live feed of my mountain cabin on the secondary monitors. My parents were currently uncorking a bottle of expensive champagne in my kitchen, toasting to their brilliant daughter. Isabella stood beside the shattered remains of my load-bearing stone fireplace, raising her glass with a sickening grin. Their joy was entirely built on a foundation of stolen money and federal crimes. The next morning, precisely at 8, a sharp knock echoed through my penthouse suite. I opened the heavy wooden door to find Julian standing in the hallway. He wore a sharp charcoal coat and held a sleek silver briefcase. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. Taking in the panoramic mountain view and the array of glowing monitors spread across my mahogany dining table, "I have the device," Julian announced, placing his briefcase on the table and snapping the brass locks open. She came home late last night completely intoxicated after celebrating her supposed real estate victory with some of her influencer friends. She passed out in the guest bedroom. It took me less than 2 minutes to open her office safe. She actually uses her own birth year as her passcode. The sheer lack of imagination is almost offensive. Julian retrieved a slim silver phone and a synchronized smartwatch. Setting them down next to my primary laptop, "Let us see exactly how careless she was," I said, connecting the phone to my secure network. As a forensic accountant, Julian understood digital security better than most. He knew Isabella used an autofill password manager for her offshore merchant accounts, a catastrophic mistake for anyone trying to hide illicit funds. I ran a mirroring program, bypassing the superficial. Within minutes, the password vault cracked open. A massive list of encrypted credentials flooded my monitor. "There!" Julian pointed his manicured nail, tapping the glass of the screen. "Look at the financial sector tags." She labeled the Bahamas account under a generic consulting alias. I extracted the specific alphanumeric proxy tag and the corresponding decryption key. I transferred the data into my global tracking database, marrying the offshore routing number we found yesterday with the direct login credentials Julian had just provided. I hit enter, executing the final sequence. The wall of Caribbean banking encryption shattered instantly. The screen refreshed. Pulling up the live unrestricted dashboard of the offshore holding account, the account owner was clearly listed as Isabella with her personal social security number and Denver address registered in the hidden metadata. Below her name, the current balance glowed in bright green digits. $1,900,000. She had already blown $100,000 since yesterday, likely paying off the aggressive private lenders Julian had mentioned. "We have her," I stated, feeling a cold rush of absolute triumph. "The digital fingerprint is confirmed. We have successfully linked the stolen $2 million from Arthur and Eleanor directly to an offshore account solely controlled by Isabella. The chain of evidence is completely unbroken." Julian pulled a thick stack of legal parchment from his briefcase, his eyes flashing with predatory intensity. "Then we start building the federal indictment right now. You handle the forensic cyber trace, and I will draft the financial framework. We are going to hand the federal agents a fully prosecuted case on a silver platter." For the next 6 hours, my hotel suite transformed into a relentless, high-powered war room. The synergy between a cybersecurity architect and a forensic accountant was devastating. We did not just compile documents, we constructed a masterpiece of criminal prosecution. I printed the initial wire transfer receipt, the Delaware Shell Company Incorporation forms for Summit Elite Ventures, and the detailed digital map showing the money laundering layers through Dubai and the cryptocurrency exchanges. I added the high-resolution screenshots of Isabella holding the fake Colorado warranty deed in my kitchen alongside the property tax records, proving I was the sole owner of Silver Pine Holdings. Julian took my financial evidence and began writing the legal memorandums. His financial phrasing was brutal and precise. He cited specific violations, officially detailing the elements of federal wire fraud. He cross-referenced the forged real estate documents establishing clear intent to defraud vulnerable senior citizens across state lines. He added his own bank statements to the pile, proving the history of her reckless spending and the sudden suspicious depletion of their joint marital assets. We worked with a synchronized mechanical efficiency. We did not stop to eat. We barely stopped to drink our coffee. Every piece of paper we generated was another year added to her eventual prison sentence. When we needed to verify the structural damage she was causing to my home, I simply pulled up the live security feed. We took additional screenshots of the demolished stone fireplace, adding a civil liability section for malicious destruction of private property. By 3 p.m, the mahogany table was covered in pristine, organized stacks of paper. We compiled everything into 3 identical heavy-duty black binders. The first binder was for the federal authorities. The second binder was for Julian and his divorce proceedings. The third binder was my personal insurance policy. Julian closed the final binder, smoothing his hand over the black leather cover. He looked across the table at me, his expression a mixture of profound exhaustion and absolute victory. It is airtight. Clara, any federal prosecutor in the country would take this case in a heartbeat. It is an open and shut conviction. She will not even have the opportunity to negotiate a plea deal. The evidence is simply too overwhelming. I rested my hands on the stack of documents, feeling the physical weight of my sister and her impending downfall. She thought she was the smartest person in the room. She thought she could manipulate our parents, steal their future, and bully me out of my own home without facing a single consequence. She never anticipated that the 2 people her family constantly disrespected would be the architects of her total destruction. "We have the weapon," I said, looking out at the vast expanse of the rocky peaks. "Now we just need the perfect stage to deploy it." Julian checked his phone, a slow and dangerous smile spreading across his face. "Well, it looks like your parents are about to provide the perfect stage for us. They just sent out a mass group message to the entire extended family and all of their wealthy society friends." He turned the phone screen toward me so I could read it myself. It was an extravagant digital invitation featuring a photo of my mountain cabin. The bold text read, "Join us this Saturday for a spectacular lifestyle brand launch and housewarming party at our new multi-million-dollar Aspen estate." They were throwing a massive and highly public celebration inside a stolen house. It was the absolute pinnacle of their toxic arrogance, and it was exactly the opportunity we needed. We had the ironclad dossier. Now we had the audience. Julian forwarded the digital invitation directly to my secure email, ensuring we had a high-resolution copy of their spectacular arrogance saved for the federal prosecutor. We spent the remainder of the afternoon synchronizing our timelines. He would return to his accounting firm to finalize the divorce filings, pretending everything was perfectly normal with his wife. I would remain in the penthouse, monitoring the digital feeds and tracking any sudden movements in Isabella and her offshore accounts. We agreed to rendezvous precisely 1 hour before the launch party commenced. The following week dragged on with excruciating slowness, yet every passing day provided a wealth of damning surveillance footage. I practically lived in front of my 4 monitors. From my luxurious hotel suite, I watched my parents transform my tranquil mountain sanctuary into a gaudy display of desperation. They hired an expensive local landscaping crew to rip out my native alpine plants, replacing them with imported decorative elements that completely violated local zoning ordinances. They brought in a parade of overpriced interior decorators who covered my sleek minimalist furniture with hideous oversized pillows and metallic accent pieces that blinded the security cameras when the afternoon sun hit them. But the most infuriating moments came from the constant stream of digital communications buzzing on my phone. Eleanor and Arthur had not just created a digital flyer, they had initiated a massive, unescapable group message that included over 60 people. The participant list was a combination of their suburban elite extended family members who had always treated me with polite indifference, and various local influencers Isabella wanted to impress. My phone vibrated on the mahogany desk. I picked it up and opened the sprawling group chat. Eleanor was in her element, firing off messages with a frantic and boastful energy. "We are just so incredibly blessed." Eleanor texted the massive group, "Arthur and I always knew our sacrifices would pay off. Our brilliant daughter, Isabella, orchestrated the most magnificent real estate deal, securing this multi-million-dollar Aspen estate entirely in cash. She is an absolute financial prodigy. We cannot wait to host you all this Saturday for organic juice cocktails and caviar by the mountains." The responses flooded in immediately. Aunts, uncles, and wealthy suburbanites sent a barrage of congratulations, praising Isabella and her supposed business acumen and fawning over my parents and their upgraded lifestyle. Arthur chimed in shortly after, inflating the purchase price to $3 million just to feed his own massive ego. Then came the message that solidified my absolute lack of mercy. Eleanor sent a direct follow-up message to the entire group, explicitly tagging my phone number so the notification would flash aggressively on my screen. "It is truly a shame Clara cannot join us for the celebration," Eleanor wrote, her passive-aggressive venom completely undisguised. She recently abandoned her career and is currently experiencing some housing insecurity. She had to vacate this very property because she simply could not afford the lifestyle. We are praying she finds a small, affordable apartment soon. But this Saturday is all about positive energy and celebrating Isabella and her massive success. I stared at the glowing screen. She had essentially announced to our entire extended family and social circle that I was a homeless and unemployed failure who had been rightfully evicted by my superior sister. She was using my supposed destitution as a dark and pathetic contrast to highlight Isabella and her glowing achievement. She wanted everyone to arrive at my stolen house, drink expensive cocktails on my patio, and pity the tragic older daughter who could not compete with the golden child. I did not reply. A seasoned cybersecurity architect never alerts the target that an investigation is underway. I simply took a screenshot of the group text and dropped it into the evidence folder. It proved malicious intent and established a public timeline of their fraud. On Thursday afternoon, 2 days before the massive event, I watched the live security feed as a high-end catering company arrived at the cabin. 5 workers in crisp white uniforms began unloading crates of expensive crystal glassware, premium organic ingredients, and massive ice sculptures. Isabella strutted around the kitchen, barking orders at the catering manager while swigging from a bottle of imported sparkling water. She was putting on a pathetic show of extreme wealth. My audio receivers picked up her conversation with a couple of her sycophantic influencer friends who had dropped by early to admire the property. "Yeah, the market is tough right now for amateurs," Isabella boasted loudly, leaning against the granite island she had tried to evict me from. "But when you have the right offshore connections and serious liquid capital, you can bypass the traditional banking bottlenecks." I basically handed my parents this estate. I am using the rest of the investment capital to launch my new wellness brand. The returns are going to be astronomical. Her friends nodded enthusiastically, completely blinded by the mountain view and the free drinks. Isabella was literally confessing to money laundering and the unauthorized diversion of investment capital on camera while standing in a house she had zero legal right to occupy. The sheer density of her stupidity was almost breathtaking. My phone buzzed again. It was a secure message from Julian. He had just finished a brutal day at his corporate firm and was checking in on our target. She just charged another $20,000 to a joint credit card I purposely left unlocked. Julian wrote, "She is funding the entire catering bill and the premium organic bar for the party using my credit line. She thinks I am too busy with the merger to review the daily statements. I am adding the fraudulent credit charges to the divorce settlement as we speak. How is the visual surveillance holding up?" I typed my response with a cold and predatory smile. "The surveillance is perfect." I replied, They are spending money they do not have to impress people who do not care inside a property they do not own. The catering setup is extensive. They are planning for a massive and highly public spectacle. Good. Julian responded immediately. A public spectacle requires a public execution. I will see you on Saturday. I locked my phone and returned my gaze to the monitors. Eleanor was now arguing with the head caterer about the placement of a massive ice sculpture, demanding it be centered perfectly in front of the shattered and exposed drywall of the load-bearing stone fireplace they had destroyed. She wanted the venue to look absolutely flawless for her society friends. She had no idea that her pristine and glamorous launch party was about to become the most heavily attended federal crime scene in Aspen history. They wanted to humiliate me in front of 60 people. They wanted an audience to validate their toxic family hierarchy. I was going to give them exactly what they asked for. The stage was beautifully set. The actors were blindly rehearsing their lines, and the curtain was about to rise on their total inescapable destruction. Friday night arrived with a thick mountain fog rolling over the peaks, blanketing the forest in a heavy and ominous gray. Inside my penthouse suite, the atmosphere was crackling with electric anticipation. Julian had just walked through my double doors. Having left his accounting firm under the guise of an emergency weekend work retreat, he dropped his sleek silver briefcase onto the mahogany dining table and immediately took his place beside me at the command center. We had exactly 14 hours before the launch party commenced. The digital surveillance feeds were running smoothly across the 4 monitors inside the mountain cabin. The caterers had departed for the evening, leaving behind towering floral arrangements and stacked crates of premium drinks. Eleanor and Arthur had retired to the master bedroom early, claiming they needed their beauty rest for their grand society debut tomorrow. The main living areas were dark and silent, but screen 3, the camera angled over the expansive timber patio, was active. Isabella was pacing relentlessly back and forth across the deck. The glowing screen of her smartphone illuminated her face in the darkness. She held the phone pressed tightly against her ear, her free hand slicing through the freezing air with agitated and jerky movements. I reached out and maximized the patio feed, turning the audio receiver dial all the way up. The microphone I had concealed beneath the decking boards was highly sensitive. It picked up the rhythmic sound of the rushing river, the rustle of the pine trees, and then, with absolute pristine clarity, the sound of my sister and her voice. "I told you to back off." Isabella hissed into the phone, her arrogant facade slipping into something much more desperate and aggressive. "I already wired you $100,000 yesterday. That was a show of good faith. You will get the remaining balance by Tuesday morning when the international banking holds clear." Julian leaned forward, his dark eyes locking onto the screen. He pulled a fresh legal pad from his briefcase and poised his pen over the paper. "That is her shadow lender," he whispered coldly. "Or worse, the syndicate contact who has been financing her fake marketing campaigns. Turn the gain up. Clara, we need every single syllable." I adjusted the frequency equalizer, filtering out the background river noise until Isabella and her voice cut through the speakers like a knife. The voice on the other end of the line was muffled, but Isabella and her response provided all the context we could ever need. She let out a sharp and cruel laugh, exhaling a cloud of cold breath into the mountain air. "Do you really think I am playing games?" Isabella boasted, her massive ego overriding her survival instincts. "I am sitting on almost $2 million in liquid cash. It was pathetically easy. My stupid parents practically begged me to take it. They liquidated their entire suburban estate, drained their retirement portfolios, and wired $2 million straight into my Delaware holding account. They actually thought I brokered a private cash deal for this Aspen property." Julian and his pen flew across his legal pad, documenting the exact timestamps of the recording. I printed a fake property deed off some cheap legal blog, slapped a Digital watermark on it, and handed it to my father. Isabella continued pacing toward the edge of the glass railing. The old fool almost cried, thanking me. They are inside right now, sleeping in the master bedroom. Completely oblivious. They think they own a luxury mountain house. They have no idea the money is sitting safely in my Bahamas account. The person on the phone muttered something else. Isabella scoffed, kicking a stray pile of snow off the deck. No. The older sister is not a problem. Isabella sneered, and my own name suddenly became the topic of her confession. She was squatting here. But we kicked her out yesterday. She is a weak and unemployed spinster who folded the second the local sheriff showed up. She packed her little bags and ran away with her tail between her legs. She is too stupid to check the county records. And she has zero money to fight me in court. I am completely untouchable. She paused, her voice dropping into a hardened and threatening tone. So, call off your guys. I am throwing a massive launch party tomorrow to keep my parents distracted and happy. On Monday, I transfer the remaining funds to a crypto wallet. And by Tuesday, your debt is paid in full. Do not call this number again. Isabella ended the call, shoving the phone back into her designer coat pocket. She took one last arrogant look at the mountains, strutted back inside the house, and slid the glass door shut behind her. The patio feed went silent. In the hotel suite, the silence was equally absolute. Julian and I sat frozen for a moment, simply absorbing the sheer magnitude of what we had just captured. We did not just have a paper trail anymore. We had a pristine high-definition audio recording of the primary suspect, detailing her entire criminal enterprise, confirming her intent to defraud, and explicitly naming her victims. Julian slowly set his pen down on the mahogany table. He looked at me, a slow and terrifying smile spreading across his handsome features. "Clara," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "She just handed us the holy grail of federal prosecution." I hit the command key, extracting the audio file from the cloud server and locking it directly onto our 2 encrypted hard drives. I felt a surge of adrenaline so powerful, it made my fingertips tingle. In a single 2-minute phone call, Isabella had confessed to elder financial abuse, federal wire fraud, interstate money laundering, and the malicious forgery of legal real estate documents. She had proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that she acted with deliberate predatory intent against our parents. She had confirmed that the $2 million was stolen, acknowledging the Bahamas account, and her plan to further obscure the funds through cryptocurrency. That recording is the difference between a civil lawsuit and a mandatory federal prison sentence, I stated, ejecting the flash drives and placing them carefully into the final binder. She thinks she is untouchable because she thinks she is the smartest person in the room. She has no idea she just gave a signed confession to a forensic accountant and a cybersecurity architect. Julian snapped his silver briefcase shut, locking the duplicate evidence files securely inside. We have the financial trace. We have the fraudulent deed. We have the proof of property destruction. And now we have the audio confession. The dossier is flawless. I looked at the digital clock on my laptop screen. It was almost midnight. The launch party was scheduled to begin at exactly 1 tomorrow afternoon. My parents were asleep in my house, dreaming of their high society debut. Isabella was asleep in my guest room, dreaming of her offshore wealth. "It is time to make the call," I said, reaching for my cell phone. Julian nodded, his eyes flashing with anticipation. "Make the call. Clara, let us burn her empire to the ground." I picked up my smartphone and dialed a secure number I had acquired during my years investigating corporate data breaches in Seattle. Agent Vance was a senior investigator in the Federal Cybercrime Division, based out of Denver. We had collaborated on a massive international hacking audit 3 years ago, He respected my meticulous digital forensics, and I respected his absolute lack of mercy for financial predators. Vance answered on the second ring. I told him I had a fully packaged wire fraud and international money laundering case, complete with a crystal-clear audio confession and offshore routing data. He told me to be at the federal field office at 7 in the morning on Saturday. The sun was just rising over the snowy peaks when Julian and I walked through the heavy glass doors of the federal building. We were escorted to a sterile and windowless briefing room on the third floor. Agent Vance walked in carrying a cup of black coffee. He looked tired, but exceptionally sharp. I slid the primary black binder across the metal table. Julian placed a digital tablet next to it, preloaded with the audio file. We sat back and let Vance do his job. He opened the binder. For 20 agonizing minutes, the only sound in the room was the turning of crisp paper and his occasional sharp intake of breath. He reviewed the fake Colorado warranty deed, the Delaware Shell Company Incorporation, and my intricate map of the cryptocurrency layering. Then Julian tapped the screen of the tablet, playing Isabella and her arrogant patio confession. Vance listened to my sister brag about duping our parents and washing the stolen cash. When the recording finally ended, Vance slowly closed the binder. He looked at us with a mixture of professional awe and deadly serious intent. "You two basically did my entire department and their job in 48 hours. Vance said, pulling his cell phone from his jacket. "This is not just wire fraud. This is elder financial abuse, forgery, and international money laundering. I am waking up a federal magistrate judge right now." Julian leaned forward, his navy suit perfectly crisp under the harsh fluorescent lights. "We need the arrest to happen today. Agent Vance," he stated, with absolute legal authority. "The target is hosting a massive gathering at 1 this afternoon at the Aspen property she fraudulently claimed to purchase. She intends to move the funds to an untraceable crypto wallet by Monday. If you raid the launch party today, you catch her entirely off guard. Seize her electronic devices before she can wipe them, and legally secure the remaining stolen funds." Vance did not need convincing. A highly public arrest with a maximum element of surprise was a tactical dream for federal agents. He left the room for an hour. When he returned, he held a stack of freshly printed documents. They were federal search and arrest warrants. A magistrate judge had reviewed our ironclad dossier and signed off on all of them immediately. The offshore accounts in the Bahamas were officially frozen pending federal seizure. The dominoes were meticulously set up, and the trap was permanently locked. I stood up and shook Vance in his hand. The legal machinery was now in motion. My family had spent the entire morning preparing for the social event of the season, completely unaware that federal agents were currently reviewing the floor plans to my mountain cabin. By noon, the Aspen property had been completely transformed into a spectacle of unearned extravagance. Julian and I sat in my hotel suite, watching the high-definition security feeds as the invasion of high society guests began. A fleet of luxury vehicles lined the private driveway, and a valet service my parents had inexplicably hired was frantically trying to manage the overflow of sports cars and luxury sedans. Inside my home, the scene was nauseating. The caterers had erected a massive organic juice bar and an extravagant ice sculpture right in the center of the kitchen, strategically positioned to draw attention away from the exposed, jagged drywall where Isabella had demolished my structural stone fireplace. Over 60 guests milled about the open floor plan and spilled out onto the timber patio. They were draped in designer winter wear, clinking crystal glasses, and marveling at the breathtaking mountain views. Eleanor was in her absolute element. She floated through the crowd in a flowing designer dress, holding a flute of expensive sparkling water and graciously accepting compliments that she had absolutely no right to claim. The audio receivers picked up every word of her self-indulgent performance. "Oh, Thank you so much. Eleanor gushed to a group of wealthy society acquaintances. Arthur and I just fell in love with the architecture. We simply had to have it. Of course. We never could have navigated the cash acquisition without our brilliant daughter. Isabella has such an incredible mind for real estate investment. Arthur was holding court near the fireplace, slapping the backs of his former business associates and laughing loudly. He proudly pointed out the modifications they planned to make, bragging about tearing down stone walls and ripping up imported floors, as if the destruction of property was a badge of honor. Naturally, it did not take long for my name to be dragged through the mud. A curious aunt asked Eleanor where I was. Noting my suspicious absence from such a major family milestone, I watched my mother wave her hand dismissively, her face twisting into a mask of theatrical pity. Clara is going through a very difficult and messy transition right now. Eleanor sighed loudly. Ensuring everyone in her immediate circle could hear, she completely fell apart under the pressure of her corporate job and had to resign. She was actually renting a small room nearby, but she could not manage the expenses and had to vacate. We offered to let her stay in our guest house, but she was just too bitter and jealous of Isabella and her massive success to accept our charity. It is a tragedy. Really. But some people simply cannot handle seeing their younger siblings thrive. The guests murmured in sympathetic agreement, praising Eleanor for her saintly patience with such a difficult and ungrateful daughter. Isabella strutted past the group, soaking up the admiring glances and playing the part of the humble self made lifestyle guru perfectly. She mingled with the crowd, clinking glasses and accepting praise for a financial victory that was entirely fabricated. Julian closed his laptop and stood up, adjusting the lapels of his flawless navy suit. He looked at the monitors one last time, his expression completely devoid of mercy. They have had their fun. I grabbed my car keys and smoothed the fabric of my emerald silk dress. It was time to crash the party. The mountain drive took less than 10 minutes. I pulled my sleek sedan right up to the valet stand, completely bypassing the long line of waiting luxury vehicles. The young valet hesitated, glancing at his clipboard, but the absolute authority in my gaze made him take the keys without a single word of protest. Julian stepped out of the passenger side, adjusting his suit jacket. It was a perfect lethal contrast to my flowing emerald dress. We did not speak. We just walked side by side up the timber steps, our shoes clicking in a sharp, synchronized rhythm against the wood. The massive glass double doors were propped wide open to let in the crisp mountain breeze. A classical harpist played a lively piece in the corner of the living room, masking the initial sound of our approach. We stepped over the threshold and into the breathtaking chaos of my stolen home. The sheer volume of people packed into the space was staggering. The air was thick with expensive perfume and the smell of catered appetizers, yet the crowd parted instinctively as we moved forward. Pure, unadulterated power has a specific gravity, and right now Julian and I were pulling all the oxygen out of the room. We glided straight toward the center of the open floor plan. A wealthy influencer caught mid-sentence dropped her jaw as she stared at us. A few heads turned, then a dozen more. The confused murmurs began to ripple outward like a physical wave spreading from the kitchen to the outdoor patio. The harpist noticed the sudden, uncomfortable shift in the room energy and faltered. The music sputtered and died completely, leaving only the sound of the rushing river outside and the nervous clinking of crystal glasses. Eleanor was standing near the jagged remains of the destroyed structural stone fireplace, holding court with a group of society wives. When the music stopped, she turned her head in visible annoyance. Her eyes landed on me. The color instantly drained from her face, leaving her chalky and pale before a violent and furious shade of red rushed up her neck. She dropped her elegant host facade entirely. "What are you doing here?" Eleanor shrieked, her high-pitched voice echoing terribly through the silent vaulted ceiling. How did you even get past the gate? The crowd parted further, revealing Isabella. She was standing near the edge of the patio, holding an expensive cocktail. She looked completely paralyzed, her eyes darting between me and the very husband she thought was safely auditing a corporate merger in Denver. Isabella, Eleanor commanded, pointing a shaking manicured finger at us. Throw them out. Throw them out right now. She is trespassing. Both of them are trespassing. Get them out of my house. I did not flinch. I did not raise my voice. I simply walked past my seething mother and approached the towering and ridiculous ice sculpture the caterers had set up in the center of my kitchen island. Julian stood firmly at my back like a heavily armed guard. I picked up a pristine crystal glass, poured a measure of expensive sparkling water, and let it fill to the brim. I brought the glass to my lips, took a slow and deliberate sip, and smiled. I looked directly at Isabella, who was now sweating profusely under her designer outfit. I am not trespassing, I said calmly, my voice carrying clearly across the dead silent room. I am just enjoying the catering at my own house. A collective gasp rippled through the sea of designer winter wear. The utter audacity of my statement hung in the heavy perfumed air. 60 high society guests who had just spent the last 2 hours drinking my expensive drinks and listening to my parents brag were now staring at me in absolute breathless shock. The harpist remained frozen in the corner. Have you completely lost your mind? Eleanor screeched, her voice cracking under the strain of her sudden fury. She took a step toward me, her manicured hands curled into tight fists. You, delusional and jealous girl. Arthur, call the local sheriff right now. Have her arrested for breaking and entering. Arthur reached into his pocket for his phone, his face twisted in an ugly scowl. But before his fingers could even grasp the device, Julian stepped forward. He moved with the predatory grace of a senior forensic partner entering a hostile boardroom. He reached into his sleek silver briefcase and withdrew a thick and heavy manila envelope. He handed it directly to me without breaking eye contact with my father. I set my crystal glass down on the granite island. The crisp clink of the glass against the stone was the only sound in the dead silent room. I opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of heavy watermarked parchment paper. The official gold seal of the state of Colorado gleamed under the recessed kitchen lighting. I did not just hand the papers to my parents. I lifted my arm and dropped the heavy certified documents directly onto the center of the kitchen island with a resounding and authoritative smack. These are the certified articles of incorporation and the operating agreement for Silver Pine Holdings, I announced, my voice projecting clearly and effortlessly across the open floor plan. I made sure every single guest on the patio could hear every word. This is the corporate entity that holds the exclusive legal title to this estate. If anyone in this room cares to examine the second page, you will see my name listed as the sole managing member and the 100% equity owner. There are no other partners. There are no hidden investors. I purchased this property entirely with my own corporate severance package. I am the sole owner. The silence that followed was deafening. The wealthy society wives who had just been praising Eleanor for her brilliant parenting began exchanging horrified and wide-eyed glances. The influencers instinctively took a collective step backward, physically and socially distancing themselves from my mother. The whispers began immediately, a low buzzing hum of scandalized realization sweeping through the crowd. Isabella looked like she was going to faint. Sweat beaded on her forehead, ruining her perfectly styled hair. She frantically grabbed her designer portfolio from the nearby counter, her hands shaking so violently she could barely unzip it. She is lying, Isabella shouted, her voice pitching into a desperate and frantic register. It is a trick. She printed those out to confuse you. I have the real deed right here. I brokered the deal myself. She yanked her fake Colorado warranty deed out of the portfolio and held it up like a shield. I looked at the flimsy piece of paper and let out a cold and sharp laugh. Go ahead. Isabella. I challenged, taking a step toward her. Show your parents and their friends the document you printed off a random legal blog. Show them the glaring formatting errors. Show them the digital watermark you copied from a website. Tell them about the signature of Marcus Sterling, the fictional executive you entirely invented because you did not realize I was the actual owner of the holding company. Arthur stared at the deed and his daughter in her shaking hands, his complexion turning a sickly ashen gray. Isabella. What is she talking about? Arthur demanded, his voice dropping to a panicked whisper. Tell them she is crazy. We wired the money to the escrow account. We have the receipt. Julian decided it was time to introduce himself properly to the audience. He stepped up beside me, radiating absolute financial authority. For those of you who do not know me, I am Julian, a senior forensic accountant at one of the top financial firms in Denver. I am also, regrettably, Isabella and her husband. The crowd murmured in shock again. Isabella looked at Julian with wide and terrified eyes, finally realizing that he was not at a weekend work retreat. He was the architect of her demise. As a certified fraud examiner, I can assure everyone in this room that the document my wife is holding is a laughable and pathetic forgery, Julian stated, his voice slicing through the room like a scalpel. Isabella is not a real estate prodigy. She is a desperate and chronically unemployed lifestyle addict. Eleanor let out a strangled and breathless sound. She grabbed Arthur in his arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his expensive jacket. This is a setup. Eleanor stammered, looking wildly around the room at her judging guests. They are trying to ruin us. We paid $2 million. You did not pay for a house. Mother, I said, delivering the crushing and inescapable truth. You wired your entire life savings into a Delaware shell company that Isabella set up 3 weeks ago. There was no escrow account. From Delaware, your brilliant daughter washed your money through an Eastern European cryptocurrency exchange and dumped it directly into an anonymous offshore account in the Bahamas. The whispers among the guests erupted into a loud and chaotic hum of utter disbelief. The wealthy elite of my parents and their social circle were now openly staring at Eleanor and Arthur with profound disgust and pity. They realized they were standing inside a stolen house, drinking water paid for by stolen funds, attending a launch party hosted by victims of a massive familial fraud. Where is our money? Isabella, Arthur roared, suddenly lunging toward his daughter. The polished and wealthy patriarch facade completely evaporated, replaced by the primal panic of a man who realized he was entirely destitute. Tell me where the money is right now. Isabella backed away, bumping hard into the caterer's table. A tray of delicate appetizers crashed to the floor, shattering perfectly in the tense atmosphere. The money is fine, Isabella stammered, her eyes darting frantically toward the glass doors, as if calculating an escape route. It is just an investment. I was going to pay you back with the brand returns. She lost it, Julian interjected coldly. She owed hundreds of thousands of dollars to underground shadow lenders. She used your retirement funds to pay off aggressive private syndicates and save her own vanity projects. She stole your money because she had already drained my personal bank accounts. And she knew I was preparing to serve her with divorce papers. Eleanor let out a piercing and agonizing scream. Her legs gave out from under her, and she collapsed onto the floor of my kitchen, weeping hysterically into her hands. The fabulous and arrogant woman who had threatened to throw me out on the street 24 hours ago was now a crumpled and homeless mess. Crying on my imported hardwood floors, the guests began grabbing their designer coats and making a rapid and highly uncomfortable mass exodus toward the front door. Nobody wanted to be associated with this level of catastrophic social and financial ruin. The grand launch party was disintegrating in real time, transforming into a humiliating and highly public spectacle of total devastation. I stood perfectly still, watching my parents and their world burn to the ground. They had blindly trusted the golden child, and she had dragged them straight into hell. Isabella stood frozen amid the wreckage of her shattered ego. The remaining guests were practically trampling each other to reach the front door, eager to escape the radioactive fallout of our family disaster. The clinking of abandoned crystal glasses and the frantic whispering of the elite formed a chaotic symphony of ruin. I watched my sister realize that her grand and carefully orchestrated illusion had completely evaporated. She was no longer the brilliant lifestyle entrepreneur. She was a cornered animal, exposed and utterly defenseless. Her eyes darted wildly around the kitchen, landing on the certified corporate documents resting on the granite island. Then her gaze snapped to me. The sheer panic in her expression rapidly morphed into something much more dangerous. It was raw and unadulterated primal rage. She had spent her entire life being coddled, protected, and elevated above me. The realization that I was the architect of her absolute destruction finally broke whatever fragile restraint she had left. "You ruined everything," Isabella snarled, her voice guttural and dripping with venom. "You set me up. You planned this just to humiliate me because you have always been a jealous and bitter failure." She lunged forward, her hands curled into tight and violent fists, aiming directly for me. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I had anticipated a physical outburst from a woman who had just lost millions of dollars and her freedom in the span of 5 minutes. Julian immediately shifted his stance, preparing to intercept her. But neither of us needed to raise a hand. Before Isabella could clear the space between the kitchen island and my position, a deafening screech of heavy tires tore through the mountain air. The sound of multiple high-powered engines roaring down the private access road violently interrupted her attack. Through the expansive open-glass doors of the living room, I watched 3 massive and heavily armored black vehicles skid to a halt on the crushed stone driveway, completely blocking the exit of the fleeing catering vans and luxury sedans. The heavy doors swung open with aggressive and synchronized precision. Over a dozen men and women wearing tactical gear and dark windbreakers emblazoned with bold federal agency lettering swarmed out of the vehicles. They moved with absolute, terrifying efficiency, fanning out across the snow-covered lawn and surging up the timber steps. "Federal agents. Nobody move," a booming authoritative voice commanded, echoing through the vaulted ceilings of my architectural estate. "Keep your hands visible and step away from the exits." The remaining high society guests shrieked in genuine terror. Influencers dropped their expensive bags and pressed themselves against the far walls, completely horrified by the sudden aggressive intrusion of federal law enforcement into their exclusive afternoon gathering. Eleanor, still weeping on the hardwood floor, let out a piercing scream of pure panic, burying her face in her hands. Arthur stood paralyzed near the fireplace, his face completely drained of blood, looking like a man who had just witnessed a ghost. Agent Vance strode confidently through the front door, his badge prominently displayed on his belt. His sharp and calculating eyes immediately scanned the chaotic scene, locking onto me for a fraction of a second to confirm the situation was under control, before pivoting his lethal focus entirely onto my sister. "Isabella," Agent Vance announced, his voice slicing through the terrified whimpers of the crowd. "You are under arrest for federal wire fraud, interstate money laundering, and the forgery of legal real estate documents." Isabella and her bravado vanished instantly. The arrogant, wealthy influencer persona melted away, leaving behind a terrified and desperate criminal. She looked at the armed federal agents surrounding her, then looked at the open patio doors leading out to the river staircase. in a final, spectacularly foolish display of panic. Isabella turned and bolted toward the mountain view deck. She did not even make it 3 steps. 2 federal agents intercepted her clumsy escape attempt with ruthless practice speed. One agent grabbed Isabella by the shoulder of her expensive designer coat, twisting her around, while the second agent kicked the back of her knees, sending her crashing hard onto the polished timber decking. The sickening thud of her body hitting the wood reverberated across the patio. It was a poetic and perfectly satisfying location for her takedown, right next to the jagged, exposed drywall of the load-bearing stone wall she had maliciously destroyed yesterday. "Get off me," Isabella wailed, struggling pathetically against the weight of the federal agents pinning her to the ground. "I did not do anything. My parents gave me that money. It was a gift." "They are lying." The sharp, metallic click of heavy steel handcuffs ratcheting shut around her wrists cut off her frantic lies. The agents hauled her roughly to her feet. Ignoring her desperate protests, they marched her back inside the house, forcing her to stand in the center of the kitchen island, completely restrained. Surrounded by the horrified and staring faces of my parents and their wealthy society friends, the absolute public humiliation was profound. The golden child was being paraded like a common thief in front of the very audience she had invited to witness her triumph. Agent Vance pulled a folded warrant from his jacket pocket and handed it to one of his deputies, instructing them to begin securing any electronic devices, cell phones, and laptops found on the premises. The net had officially closed. I stood silently next to the granite counter, watching the glorious and undeniable execution of justice. But the performance was not quite over. Julian had been waiting patiently for this exact moment. He smoothed the front of his impeccable navy suit, picked up his sleek silver briefcase from the counter, and walked slowly toward his handcuffed wife. The crowd held its collective breath. Arthur and Eleanor watched in stunned silence as their son-in-law, a senior forensic accountant, approached the federal custody scene with a look of terrifying absolute calm. Isabella looked at Julian, a flicker of desperate hope returning to her panicked eyes. "Julian, tell them," she begged, her voice cracking. "Tell them this is a mistake. Call the partners at your firm. We need the best defense attorneys right now. Fix this." Julian stopped just inches away from her. He did not raise his voice. He did not yell. He simply looked at her with an expression of pure and unadulterated contempt. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out the thick blue-bound legal document we had prepared in the ski lodge bunker. "I am not your defense attorney, Isabella," Julian stated, his voice carrying a lethal, icy clarity that made the federal agents pause and watch the exchange. "I am your victim. You stole $500,000 from my personal earnings to fund your pathetic vanity projects. You compromised my home network to launder money you stole from your elderly parents. You brought federal agents to my doorstep." Isabella stared at him, her jaw hanging slack, completely unable to process the betrayal. Julian lifted the heavy blue document and slid it effortlessly into the pocket of Isabella and her ruined designer coat. "You have been legally served," he announced coldly. "These are the finalized documents for the dissolution of our marriage, including a fault-based civil lawsuit for the financial damages you caused me. My legal team will freeze every single asset bearing your name by tomorrow morning. I am taking the house, the cars, and whatever dignity you have left. Do not ever contact me again." He turned his back on her instantly, walking away with the fierce and untouchable posture of a man who had just excised a malignant tumor from his life. He took his place back beside me, a silent and powerful sentinel of justice. Isabella sagged against the grip of the federal agents, her spirit visibly breaking as the totality of her destruction crashed down upon her. She had lost her fake millions. She had lost her freedom. She had lost her brilliant husband. and she had lost her unearned and inflated reputation in front of the most judgmental audience possible. "Take her out of here," Agent Vance ordered, gesturing toward the front door. The agents shoved Isabella forward, marching her past the shattered ice sculpture and out into the glaring aspen sunlight straight toward the waiting black vehicles. The flashing red and blue lights illuminated the driveway, casting long and harsh shadows across my property. I watched my sister disappear into the back of a federal vehicle, exactly where she belonged. The immediate threat was gone, but the aftermath of her radioactive greed remained. I turned my attention back to the center of the room. Eleanor and Arthur were still huddled on the floor. Their society friends had fled to the edges of the property, and the stark and brutal reality of their situation was finally beginning to set in. The federal raid had successfully removed the parasite, but now I had to deal with the people who had nurtured her. The few remaining party guests stood completely paralyzed near the edges of the room. They were forced to witness the utter collapse of a family they had envied just an hour ago. Arthur remained glued to the floor near the shattered remnants of the stone fireplace. Eleanor knelt on the hardwood floor beside him, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders heaving with ragged and uncontrollable sobs. The illusion of their massive wealth and superior intellect had been violently stripped away, leaving them completely exposed. Agent Vance approached them with heavy, measured steps. He did not offer a comforting hand. He simply pulled a fresh folder from his tactical vest and looked down at my parents with absolute clinical detachment. "Arthur and Eleanor," Agent Vance began, his voice projecting clearly across the silent room so every remaining society guest could hear the brutal truth. "I need you to listen to me very carefully. You are currently the victims of a massive, coordinated federal wire fraud scheme orchestrated by your daughter." Arthur blinked with hollow and desperate eyes. "But we have the deed," Arthur stammered, his voice cracking under the weight of his denial. "Isabella bought us this house. She negotiated the deal. The money is in escrow. We saw the paperwork. The paperwork your daughter provided you is a complete fabrication. You did not buy a house in Aspen today. Sir, this property legally belongs to your other daughter, Clara. Under a highly secured corporate holding company, Isabella used her vacant rental home as a physical prop to convince you to liquidate your assets." Eleanor lifted her tear-stained face. "No, that cannot be true," she wailed, her voice echoing painfully through the vaulted ceilings. "We wired her $2 million, our entire life savings. The sale of our suburban estate. She told us it was a direct transfer to the seller." Vance pulled out the exact financial tracing documents Julian and I had meticulously prepared in my hotel suite. "You did not wire a single dime to a legitimate real estate holding company," Vance stated, dropping the brutal reality directly onto them. "You wired your entire net worth into a Delaware shell company called Summit Elite Ventures, which your daughter registered 3 weeks ago for $50. From there, she immediately washed your life savings through an Eastern European cryptocurrency exchange and dumped the funds into an anonymous offshore account in the Bahamas." The sheer magnitude of the betrayal hit Arthur like a physical blow. He staggered backward, clutching the edge of the granite kitchen island for support. He gasped for air, his chest heaving as the crushing reality began to set in. "The Bahamas," Arthur repeated, his voice barely a whisper. "Our money is in the Bahamas, but you can get it back." "Right. You are the federal authorities. You can freeze the account and reverse the transfer." Julian stepped forward, his navy suit immaculate, his expression completely devoid of pity. "The federal government has already frozen the offshore account." "Arthur," Julian explained, delivering the financial death blow, "but the account is not full. Your daughter is a reckless and desperate lifestyle addict. She owed hundreds of thousands of dollars to violent underground private lenders. the second your money hit that offshore account. She started aggressively paying off her massive debts to save her own image. The money is gone. Eleanor let out a piercing and agonizing scream that chilled my blood. She grabbed fistfuls of her own hair, rocking back and forth on the floor in pure, unadulterated anguish. Our house. Eleanor sobbed hysterically. We sold our beautiful home. We sold everything we worked 40 years for. We gave it all to her. We have nothing left. We are homeless. The wealthy influencers who had stayed behind whispered amongst themselves, their eyes wide with profound horror. They were watching a prominent and arrogant couple realize they had willfully handed their entire future to a criminal and were now entirely destitute. You gave her everything because you thought she was better than me, I said quietly. Stepping into their line of sight, my voice was calm, but the words carried the weight of 35 years of emotional neglect. You liquidated your entire existence because you blindly trusted a woman who has never held a job simply because she was your golden child. You let her convince you that I was a failure. And you were so eager to believe it that you walked straight into her trap. Arthur looked at me, his eyes filled with a desperate and pathetic pleading I had never seen before. Clara, please, he begged, tears finally spilling over his wrinkled cheeks. You have to help us. We have nowhere to go. We have no money. You own this house? You have to let us stay here. We are your parents. Agent Vance cleared his throat, interrupting my father in his pathetic plea. Actually, Sir, that brings us to the final matter of business. You and your wife are currently trespassing on private property. The owner of this estate has not authorized your presence, and you have caused significant malicious structural damage to the premises by removing a load-bearing stone wall without a permit. Vance pointed toward the jagged, gaping hole in the stonework that Isabella and Arthur had enthusiastically smashed with sledgehammers just a few days ago. You are facing severe civil liability for the destruction of this property. Vance continued relentlessly. And because you have no legal right to occupy this residence, I am officially instructing you to vacate the premises immediately. If you refuse to leave, my deputies will place you under arrest for criminal trespassing. The absolute crushing totality of their ruin settled over the room. Eleanor and Arthur had not just lost their money, they had lost their home, their social standing, their golden child, and any remaining shred of their dignity. They were standing in the wreckage of a life they had destroyed with their own toxic favoritism. They had bet their entire existence on Isabella, and the house had finally won. I stood perfectly still, watching my parents process the horrifying fact that they were completely at my mercy. I had the power to save them. I had the financial means to shelter them. But after a lifetime of being treated like a disposable asset, I had absolutely no intention of offering them a lifeline. They had made their choices, and now they were going to have to live with the absolute devastating consequences. Eleanor dragged herself forward across the polished wood floor, closing the short distance between us. Her expensive designer dress was now wrinkled and stained with spilled water. She reached out with trembling, manicured hands and desperately grabbed the fabric of my emerald silk dress. She was physically on her knees, looking up at me with a face entirely destroyed by panic and smeared makeup. Clara, please, Eleanor wailed, her voice cracking into a pathetic and high-pitched sob. You are my daughter, my sweet and beautiful girl. You cannot let them throw us out into the snow. We have absolutely nothing left. Your sister took everything. We have no money, no retirement, no home. You have to let us stay here. We are family. Blood is thicker than water. I looked down at the woman who had spent 35 years treating me like an emotional punching bag. I calmly reached down, grasped her wrists, and physically removed her hands from my dress. I took a deliberate step back, severing the physical connection. Blood is what you share with Isabella, I replied, my voice echoing like ice through the silent cavernous room. And look exactly where your precious bloodline got you. You enabled a monster. And she rewarded you by completely ruining your life. Arthur, the man who had constantly belittled my career and mocked my independence, suddenly fell to his knees right beside his wife. The proud and arrogant patriarch was entirely shattered. He clasped his hands together in a gesture of pure, unadulterated begging. Clara, I am begging you, Arthur pleaded, his voice thick with tears. We were wrong. We were so incredibly wrong about everything. Just let us stay in the guest house. We will not bother you. We will stay out of your way. You have so much room here. We just need a roof over our heads until we can figure something out. Please. Clara, have some mercy. I stared at my father, feeling absolutely zero pity. Mercy, I asked, tilting my head slightly. That is a fascinating word for you to use. Where was your mercy yesterday morning when you stood in my kitchen and called the police to violently evict me? Where was your mercy when you told me I was a bitter and failed spinster who deserved to be thrown out in her pajamas? Where was your mercy when you watched Isabella threaten me? Knowing full well you were enabling my eviction from the very home I worked 80-hour weeks to afford. They had no answer. They simply kneeled on my floor, sobbing and trembling under the crushing weight of their own monumental hypocrisy. You did not care if I was homeless. I continued, my voice carrying the lethal precision of a security architect delivering a final damning report. You were perfectly happy to toss me out into the street to secure your own luxury. You bragged to your friends about stripping away my stability. You tore down my walls with a sledgehammer and mocked my life choices. You chose your side. I leaned down slightly, bringing my face level with my weeping mother. I locked eyes with her, ensuring she felt the absolute inescapable finality of my decision. When you called me on the phone to brag about taking my home, you made your position incredibly clear. I said softly, enunciating every single syllable. You told me you were taking the master bedroom. You told me to pack my bags. And you told me if you do not like it, you can find somewhere else. Eleanor gasped, burying her face in her hands as her own venomous words were weaponized directly against her. Well, Mother, I whispered coldly, I highly suggest you go find somewhere else. I stood back up and turned my attention to Agent Vance. I am officially requesting that these trespassers be removed from my property. I stated clearly. Vance offered a sharp and professional nod. He signaled to the 2 local sheriff deputies who had arrived alongside the federal raid team. The deputies stepped forward, their hands resting firmly on their utility belts. All right, folks, it is time to go, the older deputy commanded, grabbing Arthur by the arm and hauling the broken man to his feet. You heard the property owner. You have zero legal right to be here. Move toward the door. The younger deputy pulled Eleanor up from the floor. She shrieked and flailed, dragging her feet across the hardwood as she was physically escorted toward the exit. She looked wildly toward her wealthy society, friends, desperate for someone, anyone to intervene. But her high society peers simply turned their backs, refusing to make eye contact, utterly disgusted by the entire pathetic spectacle. Nobody wanted to be associated with financial ruin. Arthur and Eleanor were marched out of my living room, past the shattered ice sculpture, and out the heavy mahogany front doors. I stood shoulder to shoulder with Julian, watching as my parents were paraded down the front steps in complete and total disgrace. They had arrived at this house feeling like royalty, and they were leaving it as penniless trespassers. The heavy glass doors swung shut behind them, locking them out of my sanctuary and out of my life forever. 6 months passed, washing over my life like the steady and cleansing winds of the Rocky Mountains. I sat on the expansive timber deck of my aspen sanctuary, the afternoon sun warming my skin, a crystal glass of expensive Pinot Noir resting lightly in my hand. The mountain breeze carried the scent of pine and blooming wildflowers, completely untainted by the toxic presence of the people who used to call themselves my family. Max, my husky, rested his head happily on my feet. Basking in the tranquil alpine warmth, Julian sat across from me, looking absolutely radiant in a relaxed and tailored sweater. He held his own glass of wine, leaning back against the plush outdoor cushions. With the effortless grace of a man who had just conquered his entire world, we clinked our glasses together, the delicate chime ringing out over the sound of the rushing river. We were not just celebrating a beautiful Saturday afternoon. We were celebrating absolute and undisputed victory. The federal justice system moves with terrifying efficiency when handed a perfectly constructed and undeniable dossier. Isabella did not even make it to a trial, faced with the mountain of forensic cyber evidence, the fraudulent deed, and her own crystal-clear audio confession. Her public defender forced her to accept a plea agreement. It was a complete and humiliating surrender. She pleaded guilty to federal wire fraud, international money laundering, and elder financial abuse. Right now, the former golden child of our family was residing in a federal correctional institution in the Midwest. She was serving a mandatory 8-year sentence. There were no luxury cars, no offshore accounts, and absolutely no wealthy influencers to impress. Her daily routine consisted of waking up at dawn, wearing a standard-issue uniform, and working in the prison cafeteria for pennies an hour. The woman who had mocked me for working 80-hour weeks was now spending the prime years of her life taking orders from federal guards. She had gambled her entire existence on her own inflated ego, and she had lost everything. Julian had executed his own legal warfare with devastating precision. His divorce was finalized with record speed. Because Isabella had committed massive financial crimes and drained their marital assets to fund her illegal shadow lenders, the judge granted Julian everything. He retained full ownership of their Denver home, his impressive investment portfolios, and his dignity. Furthermore, his brilliant handling of the situation had caught the attention of the senior managing partners at his accounting firm. Last month, Julian was officially promoted to senior partner, cementing his status as one of the most formidable forensic accountants in the state. He was thriving, completely unshackled from the dead weight of my sister. The fate of Eleanor and Arthur was entirely different and brutally poetic. The federal agents had successfully seized Isabella and her offshore accounts, but Julian and his initial assessment had been entirely correct. The vast majority of my parents and their $2 million had already been distributed to violent underground private lenders to cover Isabella and her massive debts. The money was gone, vanished into the untraceable void of organized crime. My parents were left with absolutely nothing. The grand, wealthy lifestyle they had weaponized against me for 35 years evaporated overnight. Their society friends, the same people who had witnessed their humiliating eviction from my mountain cabin, completely blacklisted them. Nobody in their elite suburban circle wanted anything to do with a couple who had been defrauded by their own daughter and publicly exposed as toxic and manipulative abusers. Without a home, without savings, and without any marketable skills, Eleanor and Arthur were forced to face the harsh and unforgiving reality of the working class they had always so arrogantly looked down upon. They currently rented a cramped, single-wide trailer in a noisy and run-down neighborhood in a dusty desert town. It was a bleak and depressing complex overlooking a busy highway intersection, a stark contrast to the sprawling suburban estates they were accustomed to. To pay their rent and cover their basic living expenses, My parents had to swallow their massive pride and enter the retail workforce. At 62 years old, Arthur was currently working as a greeter at a massive discount hardware store. He spent 8 hours a day standing on concrete floors, checking receipts, and handing out shopping carts to the very people he used to mock. Eleanor had found employment as a cashier at a fast food franchise. The woman who used to boast about her designer wardrobes now wore a polyester uniform and a plastic name tag, spending her days working a drive-through window and dealing with demanding customers. They were living paycheck to paycheck, exhausted, isolated, and entirely consumed by the consequences of their own toxic favoritism. I had not spoken a single word to either of them since the day the police escorted them off my property. They had attempted to reach out a few times, sending pathetic and desperate letters begging for financial assistance or a second chance. I returned every single letter unopened. Marked return to sender. I had finally learned the most vital lesson of my life. My peace was infinitely more valuable than their comfort. Inside my home, the physical scars of their invasion had been completely erased. I hired a team of licensed and highly skilled contractors to repair the massive hole Isabella and Arthur had smashed into my house. Instead of rebuilding the solid stone wall, I had them install a stunning floor-to-ceiling, structural glass partition reinforced with architectural steel. It opened up the space beautifully, safely, and legally, allowing the mountain light to flood into the formal dining room. It was a daily physical reminder that I could take the damage they inflicted on me and transform it into something stronger and more beautiful. I had not returned to the grueling corporate grind in Seattle. Instead, I launched my own boutique cybersecurity consultancy right here from my mountain cabin. I took on only the clients I wanted, worked the hours I chose, and built my wealth on my own terms. I had regained my health, my sanity, and my absolute independence. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting brilliant streaks of orange and purple across the alpine sky, Julian raised his glass one more time. "To new beginnings," he said, his smile genuine and warm. "To peace," I replied, clinking my glass against his. We sat in companionable silence, watching the river flow by. The journey had been brutal, but it had taught me an undeniable truth. Blood does not automatically entitle anyone to your loyalty, your resources, or your sanity. You are allowed to set firm and impenetrable boundaries. You are allowed to walk away from people who only view you as an asset to be exploited, even if those people are your own parents. True family is not determined by a birth certificate. It is determined by mutual respect, genuine support, and unconditional care. Have you ever had to draw a hard line and cut toxic family members out of your life to protect your own peace? Have you ever watched the people who tried to destroy you face the undeniable consequences of their own actions? Share your experiences and your victories in the comments section below. Do not forget to subscribe for more stories about reclaiming your power, setting unbreakable boundaries, and thriving against all odds. Remember, your peace is your most valuable asset. Never let anyone convince you to give it away. The story of Clara and her ultimate triumph over her family and their breathtaking betrayal serves as a powerful testament to the necessity of self-preservation and boundary setting. For far too long, society has peddled the romanticized narrative that blood is thicker than water, a phrase frequently weaponized to imply that biological ties demand unconditional loyalty, even in the face of profound emotional or financial abuse. However, the most crucial lesson embedded in this narrative is that shared DNA does not automatically grant anyone a free pass to exploit your resources, manipulate your sanity, or disregard your well-being. Clara spent her entire life being treated as an expendable asset, an emotional and financial safety net, while her sister was continually placed on a pedestal. When her parents willingly sacrificed her security for the illusion of their golden child and her success, they demonstrated that their love was deeply transactional. The true turning point of the story was not simply Clara and Julian uncovering the offshore wire fraud. It was Clara and her quiet, internal realization that she no longer owed her abusers a lifeline. We frequently harbor crushing guilt when contemplating cutting ties with toxic family members, conditioned to believe we must endure the unbearable simply because they are family. Yet true healing requires radical self-respect. It demands the courage to meticulously build a life on your own terms and the unyielding fortitude to lock the door against those who only seek to tear your foundation down. Clara and her ultimate victory was not just putting her sister behind federal bars or physically reclaiming her Aspen home. It was the profound and quiet peace she found at the end, completely free from the obligation to save people who never truly valued her. Healing truly begins the moment you accept that your peace is non-negotiable. Take a moment today to evaluate the relationships draining your energy and dare to set the firm boundaries you need to finally prioritize your own well-being.